Jake Cooper's eyes widen as Tara's breeding tentacles snake toward his crotch for the third time in as many minutes. The Acamarian female's appendages move with alarming speed and precision, driven by an instinct beyond her control. Jake stumbles backward, narrowly avoiding their grasp. "I'm so sorry," Tara says, her voice a mix of embarrassment and frustration. "It's not intentional, I swear." Jake nods, trying to maintain his composure. He's acutely aware that this bizarre encounter could jeopardize humanity's entire future on Akamar Prime. As lead scientist for the Human Terraforming Project, he can't afford any missteps, especially not with the delicate negotiations between humans and Akamarians hanging in the balance. The joint human-Akamarian science facility buzzes with activity around them. Researchers from both species work side by side, their efforts focused on unlocking the secrets of Akamar Prime's unique ecosystem. Jake's team has recently made a groundbreaking discovery. Akamarian physiology could potentially accelerate the terraforming process, reducing the project timeline from centuries to mere decades. It's a revelation that could secure humanity's foothold on this alien world. With habitable planets scarce and Earth's resources dwindling, the success of the Akamar Prime colony is vital for human expansion. The faster-than-light travel technology that brought them here won't mean much if they can't establish permanent settlements. But now, as Jake fends off another advance from Tara's tentacles, he realizes how quickly things could unravel. The Akamarians, despite their technological prowess, remain wary of sharing their homeworld. Any perceived impropriety could shatter the fragile trust between the two species. Jake takes a deep breath, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. "Tara, we need to find a way to work together. Your expertise is crucial for the terraforming project." Tara nods, her tentacles writhing with barely contained energy. "I understand, Jake. Perhaps if we maintain a greater physical distance?" Before Jake can respond, his comm unit buzzes. It's an urgent summons from the human colonial leadership. His stomach sinks as he reads the message. They're demanding an immediate explanation for his compromising situation with Tara. Jake looks up, meeting Tara's alien gaze. He sees his own concern reflected in her eyes. Neither of them fully grasps the implications of Akamarian reproductive biology for human-Akamarian coexistence. But one thing is clear. The future of both their species on Akamar Prime now hangs in the balance. As Jake prepares to face the colonial leadership, he can't help but wonder how he'll explain the reality of their situation. How can he make them understand that Tara's actions are involuntary, a quirk of alien biology rather than a diplomatic incident? The stakes couldn't be higher. If he fails to navigate this delicate situation, humanity might lose its chance to call Akamar Prime home. The vital resources this planet offers, the key to ensuring humanity's survival and expansion among the stars, could slip through their fingers. With a final glance at Tara, Jake straightens his uniform and heads for the door. He has mere minutes to formulate a plan, to find a way to bridge the gap between human understanding and Akamarian biology. As he walks, he can feel the weight of two species' futures resting squarely on his shoulders. Jake's heart raced as he strode down the corridor, his palms sweating from the tense meeting with the colonial leadership. Their stern warnings echoed in his ears, a stark reminder of the precarious situation he now found himself in. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, threatening to crush his drive. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. With determined steps, Jake made his way to the outskirts of the human settlement, where Dr. Alara Voss's secluded laboratory stood like a beacon of hope amidst the alien landscape. As he approached the sprawling complex, Jake couldn't help but marvel at the sight. The lab was a testament to human ingenuity, a fortress of scientific discovery nestled against the backdrop of Akamar Prime's purple-hued sky. Alien specimens lined the windows, their otherworldly forms a constant reminder of the planet's mysteries. Jake pressed the intercom button, his fingers trembling slightly. "Dr. Voss, it's Jake Cooper. I need your help urgently." After a moment of silence, a crisp voice responded, "Come in, Cooper, but make it quick. I'm in the middle of a crucial experiment." The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a labyrinth of advanced equipment and holographic displays. Dr. Voss stood hunched over a workstation, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes fixed on a complex array of data scrolling across her screen. "Dr. Voss," Jake began, his voice tinged with desperation, "I need your expertise on Acamarian biology. There's been an incident." The xenobiologist's eyes narrowed as she turned to face him. "What kind of incident?" Jake recounted the events with Tara, his words tumbling out in a rush. As he spoke, Dr. Voss's expression shifted from annoyance to intense curiosity. "Fascinating," she murmured, her fingers flying across a nearby console. "I've observed similar behavior in my studies, but never with a human subject." She paused, fixing Jake with a penetrating stare. "You said this happened multiple times?" Jake nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension at the scientist's interest. Dr. Voss's eyes lit up with excitement. "This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." She gestured for Jake to follow her deeper into the lab. They stopped before a large holographic display showing complex molecular structures. "You see, Cooper, Acamarian breeding tentacles are highly sensitive to specific pheromones," Dr. Voss explained. "What's remarkable is that these pheromones are not exclusive to Acamarians. Some humans, it seems, can produce similar chemical signatures." Jake's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you saying I'm producing these pheromones?" Dr. Voss nodded, her excitement palpable. "Precisely. And I believe Acamar Prime's unique atmosphere may be amplifying this effect in certain individuals." As the implications of this discovery sank in, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. This scientific explanation could be the key to salvaging the situation with the colonial leadership and preserving human-Acamarian relations. But before Jake could fully process this information, an urgent alert blared through the lab's communication system. The holographic display flickered, replaced by the stern visage of an Acamarian High Council member. "Attention, human settlement!" The alien's multi-tone voice resonated through the lab. "All terraforming activities are to cease immediately. We have identified significant biological incompatibility issues that pose unacceptable contamination risks. This is non-negotiable." Jake and Dr. Voss exchanged alarmed glances as the transmission cut off. The situation had just escalated beyond their worst fears. "We need to act fast," Jake said, his mind racing. "Can you develop some kind of pheromone suppressor?" Dr. Voss was already moving, her hands flying over various instruments. "I have a prototype in development. It's not perfect, but it might buy us some time." As they worked feverishly to refine the pheromone suppressor, a low rumble shook the lab. Jake stumbled, catching himself on a nearby workbench. "What was that?" Dr. Voss frowned, moving to a different console. Her face paled as she studied the readings. "This is not good, Cooper. Acamar Prime's core is showing increasing instability." She pulled up a 3D model of the planet, highlighting areas of seismic activity. The very properties that make this planet ideal for terraforming also make it dangerously unstable. If we're not careful, our efforts could trigger a catastrophic event. Jake stared at the pulsing red areas on the model, a new layer of complexity adding to their already dire situation. "We need to present this information to both sides," he said, his voice firm with tenacity. "It's the only way to save the project, and possibly the planet itself." As they prepared to leave the lab, Jake's comm unit buzzed. It was Tara, her voice imbued with concern. "Jake, the High Council is demanding answers. We need to meet them immediately." "We're on our way," Jake replied, grabbing the prototype pheromone suppressor Dr. Voss had hastily assembled. They exited the lab only to find Tara waiting anxiously in the corridor. The moment she saw Jake, her breeding tentacles began to undulate, reaching out instinctively. Dr. Voss acted quickly, activating the pheromone suppressor. A faint mist enveloped Jake, and to everyone's relief, Tara's tentacles gradually retracted. "It works," Tara said, her voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "For now," Dr. Voss cautioned, "but we need a more permanent solution." The trio hurried toward the meeting chamber, the prototype suppressor offering a temporary reprieve from their biological dilemma. But as they approached the doors, they could hear raised voices from within. The negotiations had already begun, and not in a promising manner. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. With Dr. Voss's scientific insights, Tara's unique perspective, and the pressing geological concerns, they had a chance to bridge the gap between human and Acamarian understanding. But as another tremor shook the building, Jake knew their time was running out. The doors slid open, revealing a room filled with tension. Human colonial leaders and Acamarian High Council members turned to face the newcomers, their expressions a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Jake stepped forward, acutely aware that the future of both species on Acamar Prime now hinged on what happened in this room. All eyes turned to Jake, Dr. Voss, and Tara as they entered, the air thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Jake stepped forward, his heart pounding. He cleared his throat, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Esteemed leaders," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I understand your concerns, but there's a scientific explanation for what's been happening." As Jake launched into his explanation, Dr. Voss activated a holographic display showing complex molecular structures. The room fell silent, human and Acamarian representatives alike leaning forward with interest. "The breeding tentacle response," Jake continued, gesturing to the display, "is triggered by specific pheromones. Pheromones that, as it turns out, some humans can produce." A murmur rippled through the room. An Acamarian council member, his skin a deep shade of blue, spoke up. "Are you suggesting that humans are compatible with our biology?" Dr. Voss stepped forward, her eyes bright with scientific excitement. "Not exactly compatible, but there are surprising similarities. We've developed a prototype pheromone suppressor that can prevent these involuntary reactions." To demonstrate, she activated the device. A fine mist enveloped Jake, and Tara's tentacles, which had begun to twitch at his proximity, gradually stilled. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, questions flying from all sides. Jake caught fragments of conversations: unprecedented discovery, potential for collaboration, biological contamination risks. Suddenly, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Silence!" All heads turned to the source, a tall, imposing Acamarian with intricate patterns etched into his exoskeleton. Jake recognized him immediately, Ambassador Zorn, the chief diplomat for the Acamarian High Council. Zorn's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. While this discovery is intriguing, it does not negate the serious risks of continued close interaction between our species. Jake opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, Tara stepped forward. Her voice, usually soft, rang out with surprising strength. "With all due respect, Ambassador," she said, her tentacles curling with nervous energy, "my interactions with Jake have led to unprecedented insights into human physiology, insights that could be crucial for advancing the terraforming process." The room fell silent as the implications of Tara's words sank in. Jake felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Ambassador Zorn was about to respond when the ground beneath them suddenly trembled. The tremor lasted only seconds, but it was enough to send a ripple of fear through the assembly. Dr. Voss sprang into action, pulling up a new holographic display. "This is what we really need to be worried about," she said, pointing to a pulsing red core at the center of a planet model. "Acamar Prime's core is becoming increasingly unstable. If we don't act soon, the consequences could be catastrophic." The revelation shifted the mood in the room instantly. Petty concerns about biological compatibility seemed to fade in the face of potential planetary destruction. Jake saw his opportunity and seized it. "I propose a joint human-Acamarian task force," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "By combining our terraforming technology with Acamarian biological expertise, we might be able to stabilize the planet's core while making it more habitable for both our species." Ambassador Zorn's face contorted with conflicting emotions. "The risks," he began, but was cut off by another stronger tremor that shook the chamber. As the shaking subsided, the Acamarian High Council members huddled together, their voices low and urgent. After a tense moment, they turned back to face the assembly. "We can accept your proposal," Zorn said, his voice tight with reluctance. "But there must be strict protocols in place to manage biological interactions between our species." Jake nodded, relief washing over him. "Of course, We'll work together to establish those protocols. The next hour passed in a blur of negotiations and planning. By the end, Jake found himself appointed as the human liaison to the newly formed Joint Task Force, with Tara as his Acamarian counterpart. As the meeting adjourned, Jake caught the eye of the human colonial leader. The man's expression was stern, his message clear. Any further incidents would result in Jake's immediate removal from the project. Jake, Tara, and Dr. Voss made their way to the newly designated joint laboratory. As they entered, the enormity of their task hit Jake full force. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing real-time data on Akamar Prime's core instability. "Where do we even start?" Tara asked, her voice hushed with awe and trepidation. Dr. Voss was already moving between workstations, her fingers flying over control panels. "First things first," she said, not looking up from her work. "We need to refine this pheromone suppressor. It's only a temporary solution, and we can't afford any distractions." Jake nodded, acutely aware of Tara's presence beside him. Despite the suppressor, he could feel a faint tingling where her tentacles had brushed against him earlier. "Right," he said, pushing the sensation aside. "Let's start by mapping out the most unstable areas of the planet's core. If we can identify patterns in the seismic activity, maybe we can—" His words were cut off as another tremor shook the facility, stronger than any before. Equipment rattled on tables, and warning alarms blared to life. As the shaking subsided, Jake, Tara, and Dr. Voss exchanged grim looks. The clock was ticking, and the fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. "Okay," he said, his voice firm with purpose. "Let's get to work." Work. Jake's perseverance was palpable as he surveyed the lab, his mind already racing with possibilities. As they delved into their research, the gravity of their situation became increasingly apparent. The tremors grew more frequent and intense, each one a stark reminder of the ticking clock they faced. Holographic displays flickered with alarming regularity, showing the spreading instability of Akamar Prime's core. After hours of analyzing data, Jake pushed away from his workstation, frustration evident on his face. "We're not getting anywhere fast enough," he said, running a hand through his hair. "We need more direct data." Tara tilted her head, her tentacles curling inquisitively. "What do you suggest?" Jake's eyes lit up with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "We need to go to the surface, collect core samples from the most unstable regions." Dr. Voss looked up sharply from her console. "That's incredibly dangerous, Jake. The surface conditions are deteriorating rapidly." "I know," Jake admitted, "but it's our best shot at understanding what's happening and finding a solution quickly." Despite initial resistance from both human and Akamarian leadership, Jake's argument eventually won out. Within hours, he and Tara found themselves in the equipment bay, preparing for their expedition. As Jake helped Tara into her environmental suit, he noticed her discomfort. The suit, designed for human physiology, seemed to constrict her tentacles uncomfortably. "This isn't going to work," Jake muttered, examining the suit seals. "We need something custom-made for you." What followed was an intense period of improvisation. Jake worked closely with Tara, measuring and adjusting, trying to create a suit that would protect her while allowing freedom of movement for her unique anatomy. As Jake leaned in to adjust a seal near Tara's shoulder, he felt a familiar tingling sensation. Looking up, he saw Tara's tentacles reaching towards him, quivering slightly. Jake instinctively reached for his pheromone-suppressing mask, only to realize he'd set it aside while working. "Sorry," Tara said, her voice tight as she struggled to control her tentacles. "I can't always—" "It's okay," Jake assured her, trying to ignore the way his heart raced at her proximity. He fumbled for the mask, quickly securing it over his face. As he did so, his hand brushed against an unfamiliar protrusion on Tara's exoskeleton. Suddenly, a soft blue glow emanated from intricate patterns across her body. "What's happening?" Jake asked, fascinated. Tara looked equally surprised. I'm not sure. This has never happened before." Dr. Voss, who had been observing from nearby, rushed over with a scanner. "Fascinating," she murmured. "It appears to be some form of bioluminescence, likely linked to emotional responses." This discovery, while intriguing, had to be set aside as they finalized preparations for the expedition. They were joined by Crix, an Acamarian geologist whose expertise in planetary core dynamics made him an invaluable addition to the team. As they boarded the transport vehicle, Crix's skepticism was evident in the stiff set of his posture and the wary glances he cast at Jake. The tension in the small craft was palpable as they descended to the planet's surface. Their first taste of trouble came when the transport's engines began to sputter over a particularly unstable region. Jake's mind raced as warning lights flashed across the control panel. "We're losing power," he announced, fingers flying over the controls. "Tara, I need you to reroute power from the auxiliary systems." Tara moved swiftly, her tentacles proving surprisingly dexterous as she manipulated the unfamiliar human technology. With a shudder and a whine, the engines roared back to life. Their relief was short-lived. As Tara leaned across Jake to adjust a final setting, her pheromones spiked, overwhelming his suppression mask. Jake felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, his senses hyper-aware of Tara's proximity. Before either of them could react, a massive tremor rocked the vehicle. The ground beneath them split open, a yawning chasm appearing seemingly out of nowhere. Jake, still reeling from the pheromone spike, lost his footing. He felt himself falling, the dark maw of the fissure opening up beneath him. Time seemed to slow as he saw the shocked faces of Crix and Tara above him. Then something wrapped around his waist. Jake looked down to see Tara's breeding tentacles, glowing faintly blue, securely gripping him. With strength that belied her slim frame, Tara hauled Jake back into the vehicle. As Jake caught his breath, he noticed Crix staring at them, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. The Acamarian geologist seemed to be seeing his human companions in a new light. Despite the setbacks, they managed to collect the core samples they needed. As they prepared to return to base, their comm system crackled to life with an urgent message from Dr. Voss. "Jake, Tara," her voice came through, tinged with excitement and a hint of trepidation. "You need to get back here immediately. I've made a discovery about your pheromones. Well, you need to see this for yourselves." As they raced back to the base, Jake and Tara exchanged glances, a mix of anticipation and fear evident in their eyes. Whatever Dr. Voss had discovered, they knew it would change everything. The transport touched down at the base, and as the team disembarked, they were met by Dr. Voss and a delegation of human and Acamarian leaders. The atmosphere was charged with tension as Jake, still slightly shaken from his near fall, stepped forward to present their findings. He took a deep breath, acutely aware of Tara beside him, her tentacles subtly undulating with nervous energy. Whatever came next, Jake knew their lives, and the fate of Akamar Prime would never be the same. The tension in the room was palpable as Jake stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he held up the core samples. He took a deep breath, glancing at Tara for reassurance before addressing the assembled leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "what we've discovered on our expedition may change everything we thought we knew about Akamar Prime's instability." He proceeded to explain their findings, detailing how the core samples showed unusual properties when exposed to the combined pheromones of humans and Acamarians. As he spoke, Dr. Voss manipulated a holographic display, showing the leaders real-time data on the samples' reactions. "Our preliminary analysis suggests that the interaction between human and Acamarian pheromones could potentially have a stabilizing effect on the planet's core," Jake concluded, his words met with a mixture of gasps and murmurs from the audience. The room erupted into chaos. Human representatives voiced concerns about ethical implications, while Acamarian officials worried about cultural contamination. Ambassador Zorn's face contorted with barely held-back fury as he rose to his feet. "This is preposterous," he shouted, his tentacles lashing angrily. "We cannot risk Acamarian genetic purity on such a far-fetched theory. I demand an immediate halt to this line of research." As the uproar continued, Crix, the Acamarian geologist who had accompanied Jake and Tara on their expedition, stepped forward. His voice, though soft, carried a weight that silenced the room. "I witnessed something during our mission that I believe is relevant," Crix said, his eyes darting nervously between Jake and Tara. "When we encountered a dangerous fissure, Tara's quick thinking and the use of her breeding tentacles saved Jake's life. The effectiveness of their interaction was remarkable. This testimony seemed to sway some of the undecided leaders who began murmuring among themselves. Dr. Voss seized the moment to present her data, projecting a series of alarming graphs and charts onto the main display. "If we don't act soon, the consequences will be catastrophic," she warned, pointing to a particularly ominous projection. "I propose a controlled experiment to test the stabilizing effects of Jake and Tara's pheromone interactions on a larger scale." The human colonial governor, Marcus Hawthorne, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What exactly would this experiment entail, Dr. Voss?" Dr. Voss hesitated for a moment before responding. "It would require Jake and Tara to spend extended periods in close proximity without pheromone suppression. Essentially, we'd be forcing them into a form of biological intimacy." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Jake felt his face flush, acutely aware of Tara standing beside him, her tentacles curling and uncurling with nervous energy. After what felt like an eternity, Governor Hawthorne spoke. "I reluctantly agree to this experiment, but I insist on strict protocols and constant monitoring." The Acamarian High Council, visibly divided on the issue, huddled together for a tense discussion. Finally, they turned to face the assembly. "We will allow this experiment to proceed," their spokesperson announced, "under the condition that it be conducted in a sealed, quarantine facility away from both human and Acamarian populations." As the meeting adjourned, Jake's head spun with the implications of what had just transpired. He was about to speak to Tara when Dr. Voss approached them, accompanied by a woman Jake didn't recognize. "Jake, Tara, I'd like you to meet Dr. Lyra Jones," Dr. Voss said. "She's a xenobiologist specializing in interspecies reproduction. Dr. Jones will be overseeing the medical aspects of our experiment." Dr. Jones smiled warmly, but Jake couldn't help noticing a hint of scientific curiosity in her eyes as she regarded him and Tara. "I look forward to working with both of you," she said. "This is truly groundbreaking research." Over the next few days, Jake and Tara were moved to a specially constructed research station on a remote island continent of Acamar Prime. As they settled into their new living quarters, surrounded by advanced monitoring systems and the faint hum of the protective force field, Jake felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. "Are you ready for this?" he asked Tara as they stood in their shared living space, eyeing the deactivated pheromone suppressors on a nearby table. Tara's tentacles rippled with a soft blue glow. "I'm nervous," she admitted, "but if this can save our world, we have to try." With a nod from Dr. Voss, they removed their suppressors. Almost immediately, Jake felt a tingling sensation wash over him as Tara's pheromones filled the air. He watched, fascinated, as her breeding tentacles began to reach toward him, quivering slightly. "Remember," Dr. Jones's voice came through the intercom, "try to relax and let your bodies respond naturally. We'll be monitoring everything closely." As days passed, Jake and Tara fell into a routine, gradually becoming more comfortable with their biological responses to each other. Jake found himself increasingly attuned to Tara's moods, able to interpret subtle changes in her bioluminescence. Tara, in turn, developed an uncanny ability to sense Jake's emotional state through slight variations in his pheromone output. Their progress was encouraging. Dr. Voss reported that samples of Acamar Prime's core material showed increasing stability when exposed to their combined pheromones. But as the experiment intensified, so did the physiological changes in both Jake and Tara. Jake noticed an increased sensitivity in certain areas of his body, particularly where Tara's tentacles often made contact. Tara's breeding tentacles developed new, more precise movements, able to manipulate objects with startling dexterity. As Dr. Jones documented these changes, her excitement was tempered by concern. "We're in uncharted territory here," she warned during one of their daily briefings. "We need to be prepared for any possibility." Meanwhile, tensions on the main research base continued to escalate. Reports reached them of Ambassador Zorn leading protests against the experiment, citing rumors of Jake and Tara's physiological changes as evidence of dangerous mutation. Jake and Tara tried to focus on their work, but the weight of expectation hung heavy over them. They were acutely aware that the fate of Akamar Prime might rest on the success of their unusual partnership. One evening, as they were reviewing data from the day's tests, a violent tremor shook the research station. Alarms blared as equipment toppled and cracks appeared in the walls. "Emergency protocols activated," an automated voice announced, "sealing compromised areas." Jake and Tara found themselves pushed into a small sealed room as emergency bulkheads slammed shut around them. The space was tight, forcing them into close proximity as the tremors continued to rock the station. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, steadying Tara as another aftershock hit. "I'm fine, but—" Tara's voice trailed off as her tentacles began to glow brightly, reaching toward Jake. Jake felt his own body responding, his heart racing as their pheromone levels spiked in the enclosed space. Without the usual monitoring equipment and the watchful eyes of the research team, they were facing their most intense, uncontrolled biological interaction yet. As the tremors subsided, Jake and Tara stood frozen, their bodies humming with a strange, shared energy. They knew that what happened next could either provide the key to saving Akamar Prime or unleash unforeseen consequences on both their species. Jake's breath caught in his throat as Tara's tentacles brushed against his skin, leaving trails of tingling sensation in their wake. He could feel his body responding in ways he'd never experienced before, every nerve ending alive with an alien electricity. "Jake," Tara whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and something else, something primal and undeniable. "I don't think I can control it much longer." As if in response to her words, another tremor shook the station, throwing them off balance. Jake instinctively reached out to steady himself, his hands grasping Tara's exoskeleton. The moment their bodies made full contact, a surge of energy pulsed between them, and the world around them seemed to fade away into sharp focus. The air around them seemed to crackle with unseen energy, and Jake felt as if every cell in his body was attuned to Tara's presence. Another violent tremor rocked the station, and Jake instinctively pulled Tara closer. Her tentacles, glowing with an intense blue light, wrapped around his body in response. The contact sent waves of sensation coursing through both of them, unlike anything they had experienced before. "Jake?" Tara gasped, her voice a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "Something's happening. I can feel everything." Jake nodded, unable to find words to describe the rush of sensations flooding his system. He could sense Tara's rapid heartbeat, the pulsing of her bioluminescent cells, even the subtle shifts in her body temperature. More surprisingly, he realized he could feel the vibrations of the planet itself, as if he and Tara had become living seismographs. As their bodies pressed together in the confined space, Jake noticed a strange tingling across his skin. Looking down, he saw a faint, bluish glow emanating from his flesh, reminiscent of Tara's bioluminescence. Meanwhile, Tara's tentacles moved with newfound precision, their tips tracing intricate patterns across Jake's skin. "The tremors," Tara said suddenly, her eyes wide. "They're subsiding." Jake focused his attention outward and realized she was right. The violent shaking that had threatened to tear the station apart was diminishing, replaced by a gentle, almost rhythmic vibration. A red light on a nearby console blinked to life, indicating that some of the room's monitoring equipment was still functional. Jake reached out, his fingers dancing across the controls with Tara's tentacles guiding his movements. A holographic display flickered into existence, showing a real-time seismic readout of their immediate vicinity. "Look," Jake breathed, pointing to the rapidly stabilizing lines on the graph. "It's us. We're doing this." Tara's tentacles pulsed with excitement. "Our pheromones must be having a more powerful effect than we anticipated. But how?" Before Jake could respond, a crackling voice came through the room's communication system. "Jake? Tara? Can you hear me?" It was Dr. Voss, her voice tight with concern. "We're here," Jake called out. "We're okay, but something incredible is happening." "We know," Dr. Voss replied. "We're picking up unprecedented seismic stabilization in your area. What's going on in there?" Jake and Tara took turns explaining their experience, from the intense physiological reactions to their newfound ability to sense and influence the planet's geological behavior. As they spoke, Jake became aware of a deepening connection with Tara. He could sense her emotions, the ebb and flow of her thoughts. A glance at her face told him she was experiencing the same thing. Their words began to overlap, finishing each other's sentences as if they shared one mind. "Fascinating," a new voice cut in. It belonged to Dr. Lyra Jones, the xenobiologist. "It appears you formed some kind of temporary biological bond. This level of interspecies compatibility is unprecedented." "We need to get you out of there," Dr. Voss interjected. "The station's security protocols have initiated a full lockdown. We're working on overriding the system, but it's going to take time." As if on cue, the room's sealed door emitted a series of loud clicks and whirs, the locking mechanism engaging further. "No!" Jake and Tara exclaimed in unison, surprising themselves with their vehemence. "We can't stop now," Tara continued. "We're just beginning to understand what's happening." "She's right," Jake added. "We're learning to control it. The planet, it's like we can communicate with it somehow." There was a long pause before Dr. Voss spoke again. "All right, we'll continue monitoring your situation, but if anything seems amiss, we're pulling you out immediately." As the hours passed, Jake and Tara explored their newfound connection, learning to modulate their pheromone production and its effects on the local environment. They discovered they could influence the planet's geological behavior with increasing precision, calming tremors, or redirecting seismic energy. Outside their sealed room, the research station buzzed with activity. News of their breakthrough had reached both Earth and the Acamarian High Council, sparking intense debate and speculation. Governor Hawthorne arrived with a team of specialists, including Dr. Xander Reed, a controversial geneticist known for his work on interspecies adaptation. Dr. Reed wasted no time in setting up additional monitoring equipment, his eyes gleaming with scientific fervor as he pored over the incoming data. "This is remarkable," Dr. Reed muttered, his fingers flying over a holographic interface. "The potential applications are staggering. We need to expand this experiment immediately." Ambassador Zorn's voice crackled through the communication system, filled with awe-inspiring fury. "This has gone too far. I demand an immediate end to this abomination." But his protests were met with growing resistance, even among his own people. The undeniable positive effects on planetary stability were swaying public opinion on both Earth and Akamar Prime. Inside their sealed environment, Jake and Tara remained focused on their connection to each other and the planet. They had become living conduits, their bodies a bridge between two species and the world they shared. As they stood entwined, their combined bioluminescence casting a soft glow throughout the room, Jake sensed a shift in the planet's behavior. Something big was coming, a massive seismic event that threatened to dwarf all previous tremors. "But we need to prepare," Tara said, voicing Jake's thoughts. "It's time to put our abilities to the real test." Jake nodded, tightening his embrace as Tara's tentacles coiled around him. Together, they reached out with their shared consciousness, ready to face the oncoming storm and prove that their unprecedented bond could be the key to Akamar Prime's survival. Survival. As the tremors subsided, Jake and Tara remained locked in their embrace, their bodies pulsing with a shared energy that seemed to resonate with the planet itself. The door to their sealed room hissed open, revealing Dr. Voss and Dr. Jones, their faces a mixture of concern and awe. Jake and Tara slowly disentangled themselves, their skin still glowing faintly. "We need to run some tests," Dr. Voss said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The data we've collected, it's unprecedented." Over the next few days, Jake and Tara underwent a battery of examinations. Their bodies had undergone significant changes. Jake's skin now possessed a permanent, subtle luminescence, while Tara's breeding tentacles had developed new sensory capabilities, allowing her to detect minute fluctuations in Akamar Prime's electromagnetic field. As news of their transformation spread, the research station became a hive of activity. Governor Hawthorne arrived with a team of specialists, including Dr. Xander Reed, a controversial geneticist known for his work on interspecies adaptation. "We need to replicate this," Dr. Reed insisted, his eyes gleaming with excitement as he pored over the data. "The potential applications are staggering." Governor Hawthorne, under pressure from Earth to show results, reluctantly agreed. We'll expand the experiment, but with strict protocols in place. The Acamarian High Council, still divided on the issue, agreed to participate on the condition that all volunteers undergo extensive screening and counseling. Dr. Voss and Dr. Jones set to work developing a rigorous selection process, establishing a series of biological and psychological tests to ensure the safety and effectiveness of the expanded experiment. As preparations for the new phase of research began, Jake and Tara found themselves at the center of a growing controversy. Ambassador Zorn launched a public campaign to halt the project, arguing that the physical changes observed in Jake and Tara were the beginning of a dangerous mutation that could threaten both species. "This is an abomination," Zorn's voice boomed through the colony's communication channels. "We must stop this before it's too late." Despite the opposition, volunteers began to step forward. Among them was Captain Liam Stryker, a charismatic human military officer assigned to Akamar Prime's defense force. His motivations for volunteering were questioned by some who suspected he might have ulterior motives related to gaining a strategic advantage for Earth. On the Akamarian side, a young scientist named Zira volunteered, becoming the subject of controversy among conservative Akamarians who viewed her participation as a betrayal of their species' purity. As the selection process progressed, Jake and Tara continued their work at the original research station. Their prolonged exposure to each other's pheromones led to more pronounced physical changes. Jake's luminescence intensified, while Tara's tentacles developed even greater sensitivity to the planet's geological movements. Dr. Reed, fascinated by these developments, pushed for more invasive studies. "We need to understand the full extent of these changes," he argued during a tense meeting with the research team. Dr. Voss shook her head. "We need to prioritize their well-being. We can't treat them like lab specimens." The disagreement created a rift within the team, raising questions about the ethical boundaries of the experiment. As the debate raged on, a series of increasingly severe tremors shook Akamar Prime. The geological disturbances threatened both human and Akamarian settlements, adding urgency to the research efforts. Data collected during these events showed that the areas surrounding Jake and Tara's research station remained significantly more stable than other regions of the planet. In response to the growing controversy and the escalating geological crisis, Governor Hawthorne organized a public forum to address concerns and share information about the experiment. Jake and Tara made their first public appearance since the beginning of their isolation, their visible physical changes shocking the audience. As Jake stepped onto the stage, he could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him. His skin emitted a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to intensify under the scrutiny of the crowd. Beside him, Tara's tentacles moved with fluid grace, their tips sensing the electrical currents in the air. "We understand your concerns," Jake began, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "But what's happening to us, what we're able to do, it's not just about us anymore. It's about the survival of this planet and everyone on it." Tara nodded, her bioluminescent patterns shifting in a way that Jake now recognized as agreement. "We've developed a connection not just to each other, but to Akamar Prime itself. We can sense its rhythms, its needs, and we can help stabilize it." As if to punctuate their words, a massive tremor struck the city. The ground beneath them lurched, and panic erupted in the audience. Without hesitation, Jake and Tara moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies glowing intensely as they focused their combined abilities on the immediate area. The tremors subsided around them, creating a bubble of calm in the chaos. As the shaking continued beyond their sphere of influence, Jake and Tara worked tirelessly, using their enhanced abilities to help stabilize the area and assist in rescue efforts. Their actions, broadcast across both human and Akamarian media networks, demonstrated the potential benefits of their evolved state. The sight of a human and an Akamarian working in perfect harmony to save lives on both sides, transcending the boundaries of their species, was powerful. As the dust settled and the immediate danger passed, Jake and Tara found themselves surrounded by a mix of awed and curious onlookers. Among them was Dr. Xander Reed, his eyes alight with a new intensity. "I've made my decision," Reed announced, his voice carrying across the now quiet forum. I'm volunteering for the expanded experiment, and I want to be paired with Zira." His unexpected declaration sent a ripple of surprise through the crowd. Jake and Tara exchanged a glance, sensing the shift in the air. The experiment was about to enter a new phase, one that would push the boundaries of interspecies cooperation even further. As the forum concluded, the first group of human Acamarian pairs, including Captain Stryker and his assigned Acamarian partner, began their training for the expanded experiment. The research team prepared to activate the network of new research stations across Akamar Prime's most unstable regions. Jake and Tara, now seen as pioneers of a new form of interspecies cooperation, found themselves at the center of it all. As they watched the new pairs begin their journey, they couldn't help but wonder about the challenges and potential breakthroughs that lay ahead. The fate of Akamar Prime and the future of human-Acamarian relations hung in the balance. And as the next phase of the experiment loomed, Jake and Tara knew that their own transformation was far from complete. As the next phase of the experiment loomed, Jake and Tara knew that their own transformation was not nearly finished. They watched as the first group of human Acamarian pairs entered their designated stations across Akamar Prime's most unstable regions. The network of research facilities hummed to life, each one a beacon of hope for the planet's future stability. Jake and Tara stood in the central control room, monitoring the incoming data streams from each station. Dr. Voss and Dr. Jones huddled around a holographic display, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of seismic readouts. "Initial results are promising," Dr. Voss announced, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "We're seeing localized stabilization effects around each facility." Jake nodded, his luminescent skin pulsing in sync with the data flow. "It's working, but something feels different." Tara's tentacles curled in agreement. "The connections are there, but they're not as strong as ours. Some pairs are struggling." Their concerns were soon validated as reports began flooding in from various stations. The human Acamarian pairs were experiencing intense biological reactions, mirroring Jake and Tara's initial transformation, but with varying degrees of success. One station in particular caught their attention. Captain Liam Stryker and his Acamarian partner, Nyla, were having a difficult time. The readouts from their facility showed erratic fluctuations in the stabilization field. Dr. Jones frowned at the data. "Stryker's resistance is causing problems. His military training is interfering with the natural bonding process." "We need to intervene," Jake said, exchanging a glance with Tara. "We can help them adapt." As Jake and Tara prepared to visit the struggling pairs, Drs. Xander Reed and Zira entered their own research station. Reed's eyes gleamed with barely held-back excitement as he surveyed the equipment. "This is our chance, Zira," he whispered, careful not to be overheard by the monitoring systems. "We'll push the boundaries of what's possible." Unbeknownst to the others, Reed began collecting genetic samples from himself and Zira, storing them in a hidden compartment for future study. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Tara traveled from station to station, guiding the new pairs through their transformations. Each visit revealed unique adaptations among the couples, shaped by their individual traits and the specific geological conditions of their locations. At Stryker and Nyla's station, Jake and Tara found the pair locked in a tense standoff. Stryker's jaw was clenched, his body rigid as he fought against the instinctive responses triggered by Nyla's pheromones. "You need to let go, Captain," Jake said, placing a hand on Stryker's shoulder. "The more you resist, the harder it becomes." Nyla's tentacles writhed in frustration. "I can feel the planet's pain, but I can't reach it through him." Tara approached Nyla, her own tentacles intertwining in a gesture of comfort. "Show him. Don't tell him. Let him feel what you feel." As Jake and Tara guided the pair through a series of exercises, the stabilization field around the station gradually began to even out. Stryker's posture relaxed and Nyla's bioluminescence brightened. I can sense it now," Stryker murmured, his eyes widening. "The tremors, the shifts beneath the surface. It's like a living thing." Nyla nodded, her tentacles gently wrapping around Stryker's arm. "We are its caretakers now." As Jake and Tara continued their circuit of the stations, reports of decreased seismic activity across Akamar Prime began to pour in. The experiment was working, bringing a period of relative calm to the turbulent planet. Governor Hawthorne seized upon this success, pushing for an expansion of the program. "We need to establish permanent human Acamarian settlements in the most unstable regions," he announced during a video conference with the research team. "These bonded pairs can serve as living stabilizers." The proposal sent shockwaves through both human and Acamarian communities. Volunteers began stepping forward, drawn by the possibility of becoming part of a new, hybridized species. Among them was Crix, the Acamarian geologist who had worked with Jake and Tara in the early days of the project. As preparations for the next phase began, Dr. Voss and Dr. Jones delved deeper into the physiological changes occurring in the human Acamarian pairs. Their findings were startling. "The adaptations are more extensive than we initially believed," Dr. Voss reported, her voice hushed. "The changes are occurring at a cellular level. They could potentially be passed on to offspring." This revelation sparked intense debate about the long-term implications of the experiment. Dr. Reed, now leading the research team due to his first-hand experience as a participant, began preparations for controlled breeding attempts between bonded pairs. Jake and Tara, their connection to each other and the planet growing stronger by the day, found themselves at the center of these discussions. They reported having vivid, shared dreams of Acamar Prime's core and an intuitive understanding of its geological processes that went beyond mere data interpretation. As the debate raged on, a crisis emerged. One of the research stations, located in a particularly volatile region, sent out a distress signal. The stabilization field had collapsed, and tremors were intensifying rapidly around the facility. Jake and Tara felt a surge of empathic connection to the endangered pair and the planet itself. Without hesitation, they volunteered for the rescue mission. As they boarded a high-speed shuttle, Jake turned to Tara, his skin pulsing with drive. "This is what we've been preparing for. Everything we've learned, everything we've become. It all leads to this moment." Tara's tentacles coiled tightly around Jake's arm, her bioluminescence matching his glow. "Together we can save them. We can save this world." The shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling them towards the crisis zone. As Acamar Prime's unstable surface blurred beneath them, Jake and Tara braced themselves for the challenge ahead, knowing that the true test of their evolved abilities and the strength of their bond was about to begin. Begin! The shuttle's thrusters roared as Jake expertly maneuvered through the turbulent atmosphere, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the treacherous air currents with precision. Tara's tentacles splayed across the control panel, her bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly as she processed the incoming data. "We're approaching the danger zone," Jake announced, his skin pulsing with a soft blue glow. "The seismic activity is off the charts." Tara's voice resonated with concern. "I sense extreme distress from the station. We must hurry." The landscape below was chaos incarnate. Fissures opened and closed like gaping maws, while rock formations crumbled and reshaped themselves in real time. As they neared the research station, the true extent of the disaster became apparent. The once sturdy facility now resembled a house of cards in a windstorm. Its walls buckled and swayed, while support beams groaned under the strain. Jake brought their vehicle to a hovering stop, mere meters from the entrance. "Creating stabilization field," Tara announced, her tentacles undulating in complex patterns. Jake joined her, their combined efforts generating a shimmering bubble of calm around the station. The immediate area stilled, tremors subsiding within their sphere of influence. "Let's move," Jake said, his voice tight with urgency. They exited the shuttle, the contrast between their protected zone and the surrounding chaos stark and unsettling. As they approached the station's entrance, a violent tremor shook the ground beyond their field. A massive boulder dislodged from a nearby cliff, hurtling toward them. Jake reacted instinctively, his enhanced strength allowing him to catch the boulder midair. With a grunt of effort, he hurled it aside, where it shattered harmlessly against the unstable ground. Inside the station, alarms blared and emergency lights flashed. Jake and Tara moved swiftly through the corridors, clearing debris with practiced efficiency. Tara's tentacles proved invaluable. bracing weakened sections of the ceiling as they passed. They found Dr. Elias Thornton and Vex in the main research lab. Thornton cradled his Acamarian partner, who lay motionless on the floor. Vex's normally vibrant tentacles were pale and limp, a viscous fluid seeping from several deep lacerations. "Thank the stars you're here," Thornton gasped, his face etched with worry. "Vex was injured when the first tremor hit. She can't maintain our stabilization field, and I don't know how to help her." Jake knelt beside them, his glowing skin casting an eerie light over Vex's injuries. "We need to establish a connection, all four of us. It's the only way to extend our field and get you out of here." Tara moved closer, her tentacles gently probing Vex's injuries. "Vex's breeding tentacles are severely damaged. The pheromone production is disrupted." Thornton's eyes widened. "But without the pheromones, how can we—" "We'll have to use our bond," Jake interrupted, looking at Tara. "We can channel our stabilizing effect through all of us." Tara nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing in agreement. "It will require intense physical intimacy. Are you prepared for this?" Thornton hesitated for a moment, then nodded resolutely. "Whatever it takes to save Vex and get out of here." Jake and Tara positioned themselves on either side of the injured pair. Slowly, carefully, they began to intertwine their bodies. Jake's luminescent skin made contact with Thornton's, while Tara's tentacles gently wrapped around Vex's injured form. As their pheromones mingled and their bioelectric fields synchronized, a powerful sensation washed over them. Jake felt as though his consciousness was expanding, encompassing not just Tara, but Thornton and Vex as well. He could sense the planet's rhythms more clearly than ever before, feeling the ebb and flow of tectonic forces beneath them. The station groaned around them, a stark reminder of their precarious situation. "We need to move," Jake said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining their connection. As one interconnected unit, they began to make their way out of the lab. Their movements were awkward at first, but they quickly fell into a rhythm, anticipating each other's actions with uncanny precision. Tara's tentacles continued to brace weakening structures as they passed, while Jake cleared their path of debris. Thornton supported Vex, who had begun to stir, her tentacles twitching with renewed vitality. They were halfway to the exit when Vex suddenly convulsed, a keening cry escaping her. Her damaged tentacles began to pulse and writhe, growing and regenerating at an alarming rate. "What's happening to her?" Thornton cried, struggling to maintain his hold on his partner. Jake, drawing on his deepening connection with the planet and his expanded awareness, instinctively understood. It's an accelerated evolution. The intense pheromone interaction has triggered a rapid healing response. Tara's voice was filled with awe. "She's adapting to survive in this unstable environment. We must guide her through the process." As they continued their escape, Jake found himself acting as a conduit, channeling the planet's energy to help Vex navigate her transformation. He could feel the strain on his own body, but the urgency of their situation drove him forward. They burst out of the station just as the final support beams gave way. The structure collapsed behind them in a thunderous roar of twisting metal and shattering concrete. But as they turned to look, they saw something remarkable. The stabilization field they had generated was expanding rapidly, far beyond its previous boundaries. The volatile landscape around them began to calm, tremors subsiding across a vast area. As they made their way to the waiting shuttle, still connected in their intimate biological network, Jake marveled at the unexpected power they had unleashed. He knew that this experience would change everything, not just for them, but for the future of Akamar Prime and the relationship between humans and Akamarians. The shuttle's engines hummed to life as they secured themselves inside, their bodies still intertwined. As they lifted off, leaving the now stabilized region behind, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something monumental. The true implications of their evolving abilities were yet to be fully understood, and he sensed that their transformation was far from complete. Complete. The shuttle docked at the main research facility, and as the team disembarked, still physically connected, they were met with a flurry of activity. Dr. Reed rushed forward, his eyes wide with excitement. "Incredible! The readings we received during your rescue mission were off the charts. We need to begin studying this new biological network immediately. Jake felt a twinge of unease as he gently disentangled himself from the others. Dr. Reed, we've just been through an intense experience. Maybe we should take some time to— No time, Reed interrupted, gesturing for his team to approach with various scanning devices. The potential implications of this discovery are too significant to delay. As the research team swarmed around them, Jake noticed Dr. Jones hanging back, her brow furrowed with concern. She caught his eye and gave a slight shake of her head. Over the next few days, Jake, Tara, Dr. Thornton, and Vex underwent a battery of non-invasive tests. Dr. Jones insisted on a cautious approach, much to Dr. Reed's frustration. We need to understand the nature of this interconnection before we even consider more invasive procedures, Jones argued during a tense meeting. Reed scoffed. Time is of the essence. My breeding program could— Your breeding program is premature and potentially dangerous, Jones snapped. We don't know enough about the long-term effects of these bonds. As the debate raged on, Jake and Tara were in the middle of another scanning session when it happened. A sudden, overwhelming surge of energy coursed through their bond, unlike anything they had experienced before. Jake's skin erupted in a brilliant display of bioluminescence, while Tara's tentacles writhed and pulsed with intense light. Alarms blared throughout the facility as the surge radiated outward, affecting the other bonded pairs in nearby research stations. Monitors flickered with incoming distress signals as pairs reported sudden, intense sensations and loss of control over their stabilization fields. Containment Protocol Alpha, Dr. Reed shouted over the chaos. Get them to isolation immediately. Jake and Tara found themselves being rushed to a specially designed containment unit, its walls lined with dampening technology. As the door sealed behind them, the cacophony of alarms faded to a muffled drone. What's happening to us? Tara asked, her voice trembling as her tentacles continued to pulse erratically. Jake reached for her, their connection momentarily calming the storm of sensations. I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. Outside the containment unit, the facility was in uproar. Governor Hawthorne arrived, his face grim as he surveyed the situation. I want a full report now, he demanded. Dr. Reed launched into an explanation, emphasizing the potential benefits of harnessing this new power. Dr. Jones countered with concerns about safety and ethics. Hawthorne listened, his expression growing more troubled by the moment. Finally, he held up a hand for silence. Enough. All new pairings are to be halted immediately. No more discussions of breeding programs until we fully understand what we're dealing with. As the governor assembled a task force to assess the situation, word of the incident spread quickly. Ambassador Zorn seized the opportunity, organizing a massive protest outside the main research facility. End the experiment now, Zorn's voice boomed through loudspeakers as a sea of human and Acamarian protesters gathered. Separate the bonded pairs before it's too late. Inside their containment unit, Jake and Tara were oblivious to the growing tension outside. They sat in meditation, trying to understand and control their new abilities. Suddenly, Jake gasped, his eyes flying open. Tara, do you feel that? He asked, excitement building in his voice. Tara nodded, her tentacles swaying gently. The planet, it's speaking to us. Together, they reached out with their minds, connecting to Akamar Prime's geological processes on a scale they had never imagined possible. They sensed impending tremors and shifting tectonic plates across vast distances. We can stabilize it, Jake realized, his skin beginning to glow softly. As they focused their combined energy, they felt the planet respond. Seismic activity across entire regions began to calm, far beyond the reach of any research station. Dr. Reed watched the monitors in awe as reports of widespread stabilization poured in. This is it, he whispered, his eyes gleaming. This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Despite objections from Dr. Jones and Dr. Voss, Reed presented a proposal to Governor Hawthorne, a risky experiment using a prototype pheromone enhancer to amplify Jake and Tara's abilities. Hawthorne, seeing a potential solution to the planet's instability, gave his approval. As preparations began, a new face arrived at the facility, Dr. Lyra Novak, a renowned geneticist specializing in rapid evolutionary adaptations. I need access to all your data, Novak demanded, her sharp eyes taking in the tense atmosphere, especially everything you have on Jake and Tara. As Dr. Novak delved into the research, another unexpected development occurred. Captain Stryker burst into the control room, his eyes wide with excitement. "We can hear them," he exclaimed, gesturing to his Acamarian partner Nyla. "Not just each other, but all the bonded pairs. It's like telepathy." This new ability quickly proved invaluable, creating an instant network of communication between research stations. Data sharing and coordination improved dramatically, even as debates about the future of the experiment intensified. Dr. Novak emerged from her analysis with troubling news. "The bonds are causing rapid genetic changes in both species," she reported to a stunned Governor Hawthorne and Acamarian High Council. "If this continues, we could be looking at the emergence of an entirely new hybrid species within a few generations." As the implications of this revelation sent shock waves through both communities, Dr. Reed pressed forward with his pheromone enhancement experiment. Jake and Tara were prepared, electrodes attached to their bodies as Reed initiated the procedure. The moment the enhancer was activated, Jake and Tara's bodies erupted in a dazzling display of bioluminescence. The light spread rapidly, engulfing the entire containment unit. Alarms blared as the facility's sensors detected a massive energy surge. "Readings are off the scale," a technician shouted as monitors flickered and equipment sparked. As the energy pulse radiated outward, causing widespread interference across Akamar Prime, Dr. Reed's triumphant smile faded. The realization dawned that they had unleashed a power beyond their control, one that would reshape the future of both species and the planet itself in ways they could not yet fathom. Comprehend. The energy surge intensified, and suddenly a brilliant beam of light erupted from Jake and Tara's intertwined forms. It pierced through the containment unit's ceiling, shooting straight into the sky above Akamar Prime. Dr. Reed's triumphant expression morphed into one of shock and fear. "Shut it down, Yuri Laras," he shouted, frantically working the controls. "We need to terminate the experiment now." But it was too late. The equipment sparked and sizzled, refusing to respond. Jake and Tara were trapped in an escalating feedback loop of energy, their bodies pulsing with an otherworldly glow. The research facility's power grid groaned under the strain. Lights flickered and died as systems overloaded. Within moments, the entire complex was plunged into darkness, the blackout spreading rapidly to surrounding areas. In the chaos that followed, Ambassador Zorn saw his opportunity. He quickly gathered a group of conservative Acamarian officials, his voice urgent and persuasive. "This experiment has gone too far," Zorn insisted. "We must act now to protect both our species. Authorize the emergency separation protocol." As Zorn's influence spread, Captain Stryker and Nyla were hit by a wave of psychic distress. Their newfound telepathic abilities connected them to Jake and Tara's anguish. "We have to help them," Nyla said, her tentacles twitching with agitation. Stryker nodded, already reaching out mentally to other bonded pairs. "I'm calling in everyone we can trust. We're mounting a rescue mission." They assembled a team quickly, drawing from nearby research stations. As they approached the main facility, they encountered a line of security forces loyal to Zorn. "Stand down," a guard ordered, weapon raised. "This area is under lockdown by order of Ambassador Zorn." Stryker stepped forward, hands raised. "We're here to help. Those are our friends in there." The standoff intensified, neither side willing to back down. Inside the facility, Governor Hawthorne paced anxiously. Reports flooded in from across the planet. The energy beam was visible from orbit, and the atmosphere shimmered with an eerie glow. "Sir," an aide approached, voice low, "there's a contingency plan, a planetary defense system designed for energy anomalies like this." Hawthorne's eyes widened. "Why wasn't I informed of this before?" "It was classified, sir, top secret, but given the circumstances..." The governor closed his eyes, weighing the impossible choice before him. Activating the system could neutralize the threat to the planet, but it might also kill Jake and Tara. As Hawthorne grappled with his decision, Dr. Lyra Novak burst into the room, her eyes wild with excitement and fear. "Governor, you need to see this," she said, thrusting a data pad towards him. "Jake and Tara's genetic structure, it's changing at an unprecedented rate. They're becoming something entirely new." Hawthorne scanned the data, his brow furrowed. "What does this mean, Doctor?" Novak's voice trembled with the weight of her realization. "It means they might be the key to permanently stabilizing Akamar Prime, but only if they survive the next few hours." Outside, the landscape began to change. Strange crystalline formations erupted from the ground, pulsing with the same bioluminescent energy that engulfed Jake and Tara. The structures spread rapidly, reshaping the environment around the research complex. Dr. Voss and Dr. Jones worked feverishly in the partially powered lab, trying to make sense of the readings. "Look at this," Voss said, pointing to a seismic chart. "The planet's tectonic activity is decreasing across the board." Jones nodded, her eyes fixed on another screen. "The energy pulse, it's syncing with Akamar Prime's natural geological rhythms." They shared a look of dawning comprehension. "We need to channel this energy," Jones said, "distribute it across the planet's surface." Voss nodded grimly. "Using the research stations as conduits. It's risky, but it might be our only chance." As they raced to implement their plan, Captain Stryker's team clashed with Zorn's forces outside the facility. The air crackled with tension and the occasional burst of weapons fire. Inside the containment unit, Jake and Tara floated in a sea of pulsating energy. Their bodies had changed, becoming more luminous and fluid. Through their shared consciousness, they sensed the planet's rhythms, feeling the ebb and flow of Akamar Prime's very core. "We're connected to everything," Jake's thoughts echoed in Tara's mind. "The planet," Tara responded, "it's communicating with us." Their awareness expanded, encompassing the growing crystalline structures, the native flora and fauna rapidly mutating in response to the energy surge, and the conflicts raging around them. Governor Hawthorne stood before the planetary defense system controls, his hand hovering over the activation switch. The choice before him seemed impossible: risk the planet's destruction or potentially sacrifice Jake and Tara, along with all the progress they'd made. As tensions reached a boiling point on all fronts, Stryker's team battling Zorn's forces, scientists racing against time to implement their risky plan, and the planet itself undergoing a radical transformation, the fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance. The next few moments would determine the future of both species and the world they sought to share. As Governor Hawthorne's hand hovered over the planetary defense system's activation switch, a sudden surge of energy erupted from the containment unit. The room filled with a blinding light, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When they looked again, they saw an expanding field of pulsating energy engulfing the entire research facility. Alarms blared as the energy field interfered with the defense system's targeting mechanisms. Hawthorne stumbled back from the controls, his face a mix of relief and bewilderment. "What's happening?" he demanded, turning to Dr. Novak. Before she could respond, the crystalline structures surrounding the facility began to resonate with the energy field. A harmonious frequency spread across Akamar Prime's surface, visible as waves of light rippling through the atmosphere. Outside, Captain Stryker and his team of bonded pairs found themselves glowing with a similar bioluminescence. They pushed forward, their bodies seemingly in tune with the energy emanating from Jake and Tara. As they approached Zorn's security forces, the guards' weapons malfunctioned, rendered useless by the spreading energy field. Stryker locked eyes with Nyla, their telepathic bond stronger than ever. "Now's our chance, he said. They led the charge, breaking through the disoriented security line and into the facility. As they neared the containment unit, the energy field parted for them like a curtain, recognizing them as compatible entities. The rescue team pressed on, their own bodies now pulsing with the same otherworldly light. Inside the unit, they found Jake and Tara in a state of metamorphosis. Their bodies had begun to merge, human and Akamarian anatomy intertwining in ways that defied comprehension. Tentacles and limbs flowed together, skin shimmering with patterns of light. Stryker swallowed hard, fighting back his shock. "Jake, Tara, can you hear us?" There was no verbal response, but Stryker and Nyla felt a pull in their minds. Guided by their enhanced abilities, they established a mental link with the merged pair. In the lab, Dr. Novak's eyes widened as she analyzed the latest genetic data. "Governor," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "You need to see this." Hawthorne rushed to her side, staring at the complex diagrams on her screen. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "Jake and Tara's DNA," Novak explained, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "It's reconfigured itself into a triple helix structure, human, Acamarian, and something else, something new." As they watched, the energy field continued to expand beyond the facility. Across Akamar Prime, research stations housing bonded pairs lit up like beacons. Each station amplified the stabilizing effect, channeling the energy through the planet's crust. In orbit, satellite imagery revealed the spread of crystalline structures across the planet's surface. The formations created intricate patterns, resembling a massive glowing circuit board. Dr. Voss and Dr. Jones, monitoring the data from a makeshift command center, exchanged looks of awe. "The structures," Voss said, pointing to a holographic display. "They're acting as a planetary-scale stabilization system." Jones nodded, her eyes fixed on the seismic readings. "Tectonic stress is decreasing across all major fault lines. It's working." In the containment unit, Jake and Tara's merge form began to separate. As their individual bodies emerged, the rescue team gasped at the changes. Jake's skin now bore intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings, pulsing in rhythm with the planet's new energy. Tara's breeding tentacles had evolved into complex, multifunctional appendages that seemed to interface directly with the surrounding crystalline structures. Their eyes fluttered open, filled with a new awareness. Through their enhanced bond, Stryker and Nyla sensed the vast network of minds now connected across Akamar Prime. They could feel the thoughts and emotions of every bonded pair, and beneath it all, a deep, resonant consciousness, the planet itself. Jake's voice when he spoke seemed to echo with this newfound connection. "We can see it all," he said, his gaze distant. "The planet, the people, everything. It's all part of a greater whole." Tara's tentacles swayed gently, interfacing with the crystalline growths around them. "We understand now," she added, her voice harmonizing with Jake's. "This is what we were meant to become." As word of the transformation spread, the facility buzzed with activity. Governor Hawthorne, realizing the situation had escalated beyond conventional control, made a difficult decision. "Evacuate all non-bonded personnel," he ordered, his voice firm. "Only bonded pairs and essential scientific staff are to remain on site." Outside, Ambassador Zorn watched in dismay as his carefully laid plans crumbled. The planet was changing before his eyes, becoming something he no longer recognized or understood. In a last-ditch effort to maintain control, he activated his emergency comm link. "This is Ambassador Zorn," he announced, his voice broadcast across all Akamarian channels. "I am ordering an immediate planetary evacuation. Akamar Prime is no longer safe for any of us." But even as Zorn's message went out, many Akamarians and humans alike found themselves drawn to the transformation rather than frightened by it. The bond between the species, once controversial, now seemed to hold the key to a new future. As the non-bonded personnel began their evacuation, Dr. Reed emerged from his secure location. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of scientific fascination and ambition as he approached Governor Hawthorne. "Governor," Reed said, his voice low and urgent, "we have an unprecedented opportunity here. With Jake and Tara's amplified abilities, we could establish a permanent psychic link between all inhabitants of Akamar Prime. Imagine it. True unity between our species, a shared consciousness that could ensure lasting peace and cooperation." Hawthorne frowned, considering the implications. Before he could respond, Jake and Tara stepped out of the containment unit, their bodies still pulsing with energy. The crystalline structures around them seemed to bend towards them, responding to their presence. As they prepared to address the assembled team of scientists and bonded pairs, the air crackled with potential. The fate of two species and an entire planet hung in the balance, waiting for the next words that would shape the future of Akamar Prime. Jake took a deep breath, his newfound connection to the planet giving weight to his words. "What's happening here is bigger than any of us," he began, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "It's not just about humans and Acamarians anymore. It's about the evolution of life itself." Tara's tentacles swayed, interfacing with the surrounding crystals as she spoke. "We stand at a crossroads," she added, her voice harmonizing with Jake's. "The choice we make now will determine the course of our shared future." The assembled crowd listened in rapt attention, aware that they were witnessing a pivotal moment in the history of both their species. As Jake and Tara continued to explain their vision for Akamar Prime, the energy field pulsed around them, a tangible reminder of the unprecedented changes still unfolding across the planet's surface. As Jake and Tara finished speaking, the energy field surrounding them intensified. Suddenly, Tara's evolved breeding tentacles reacted to Jake's presence, reaching out and wrapping around him. The intimate contact triggered a surge of energy that coursed through their bodies, causing the crystalline structures around them to pulse in sync with their shared heartbeat. The assembled team watched in awe and trepidation as the two hybrids became enveloped in a cocoon of light. Dr. Reed, his eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity, stepped forward. "Jake, Tara," he called out, his voice steady despite the extraordinary scene before him. "Try to control the energy flow between you. Focus on directing it consciously." Jake nodded, closing his eyes in concentration. Tara's tentacles tightened slightly around him, and the pulsing light began to change rhythm, matching their synchronized breathing. Captain Stryker felt a tingling sensation across his skin. He looked down to see faint bioluminescent patterns forming on his arms. Beside him, Nyla gasped as her tentacles began to twitch and move with newfound dexterity. "Stryker," Nyla whispered, her eyes wide, "it's happening to us too." Before anyone could react to this new development, alarms blared throughout the facility. Governor Hawthorne rushed to a nearby console, his face grim as he read the incoming transmission. "We have an incoming shuttle," he announced. "United Space Command. They're requesting immediate landing clearance." Dr. Novak frowned, looking up from her datapad. "United Space Command? What are they doing here?" The energy field around Jake and Tara dissipated as they turned their attention to the new arrival. Moments later, the facility doors slid open, revealing a tall, imposing woman in a crisp military uniform adorned with Admiral's insignia. "Admiral Helena Frost, United Space Command," she announced, her resolute expression sweeping the room. "I'm here to assess the situation on Akamar Prime." Governor Hawthorne stepped forward, his posture tense. "Admiral Frost, this is unexpected. We weren't informed of any official visit from Earth." Frost's lips curved into a thin smile. "The situation here has escalated beyond your jurisdiction, Governor. The USC has a vested interest in these developments." As Hawthorne and Frost engaged in a tense discussion about access and authority, Dr. Novak returned to her genetic analysis. Her eyes widened as new data scrolled across her screen. "This is incredible," she murmured, drawing the attention of Dr. Reed and the others. "The third component in Jake and Tara's DNA, it contains elements that match Akamar Prime's mineral composition. It's as if the planet itself is influencing their evolution." Dr. Reed leaned in, studying the complex diagrams. "We need to explore this further. What if we created a controlled environment for Jake and Tara to fully connect with each other and the planet?" Novak nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "A specially designed chamber, isolated from external interference. We could accelerate their adaptation, maybe even unlock new abilities." As they discussed the experimental setup, satellite imagery on the main screen showed the continued spread of crystalline structures across Akamar Prime. The formations created an intricate network, with larger nodes appearing at key tectonic stress points. Jake and Tara watched the images, their bodies still humming with energy. "We can feel it," Jake said, his voice distant. "The planet is reshaping itself." Tara nodded, her tentacles swaying gently. "It's trying to find balance. We're part of that process now." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside the facility. Through the windows, they could see a group of protesters gathering, holding signs with slogans like, humans and Acamarians apart, and leave Acamar Prime. Governor Hawthorne sighed, rubbing his temples. The purists. They've been gaining support among the unbonded population. Their leader, Victor Kane, is quite charismatic. Admiral Frost's eyes narrowed as she watched the protesters. This situation is more volatile than we anticipated. We need to contain it before it spirals out of control. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared again. Dr. Voss rushed to a console, his face pale. We've got reports of an attack on one of the outlying research stations. It's the purists. They're trying to sabotage the equipment. Jake and Tara shared a look, their newfound abilities surging. Without a word, Jake reached out, seemingly connecting with the crystalline structures in the attacked station. Tara's tentacles extended, interfacing with nearby crystals. We can stop them, Tara said, her voice strained with concentration. The main screen flickered, showing live footage from the attack station. The assembled team watched in amazement as crystalline formations grew rapidly, blocking the purists' access to critical areas and safely containing the threat. Dr. Reed's eyes lit up with excitement. This is it. This is the key to ensuring Acamar Prime's stability. We need to accelerate the bonding process for all human Acamarian pairs. A planet-wide network of hybrids could protect us against any threat. Admiral Frost stepped forward, her voice cold. That's not your decision to make, Doctor. The military implications of these abilities need to be thoroughly assessed before any further action is taken. As tensions in the room rose, Dr. Novak spoke up. We need to focus on understanding what's happening to Jake and Tara first. The experimental chamber's ready. We should proceed immediately. Governor Hawthorne nodded, making a decision. Agreed. Jake, Tara, are you willing to enter the chamber? The hybrid pair looked at each other, communicating silently through their enhanced bond. Finally, they turned to face the group. We're ready, Jake said. Let's do this, Tara added. As Jake and Tara were led to the specially designed chamber, the crystalline structures throughout the facility began to resonate, creating a low hum that seemed to spread across the planet. The air crackled with possibility and tension. Dr. Novak input the final commands and the chamber door slid open. Jake and Tara stepped inside, their bodies already beginning to glow with internal light. As the doors sealed behind them, the assembled scientists, political leaders, and military personnel watched in anticipation. Inside the chamber, Jake and Tara stood face to face, their transformed bodies pulsing in sync with the planet's new rhythm. As the experiment began, they reached for each other, ready to explore the full extent of their connection to each other and to Acamar Prime itself. As the chamber doors sealed behind Jake and Tara, the air around them began to shimmer with energy. The crystalline structures throughout the facility pulsed with increasing intensity, their glow synchronizing with the rhythm of the hybrid pair's heartbeats. Dr. Novak's fingers flew across her control panel, adjusting parameters and monitoring vital signs. Energy levels are rising exponentially, she reported, her voice tinged with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Inside the chamber, Jake and Tara found themselves suspended in a swirling vortex of light. Their bodies began to glow, the luminescence growing brighter with each passing second. Jake felt a tingling sensation across his skin as new patterns of bioluminescence emerged, intricate designs forming and reforming in mesmerizing sequences. Tara's breeding tentacles quivered and expanded, reaching out towards Jake. As they made contact, a surge of energy coursed through both of them. Their bodies began to merge, just as they had during the previous incident. But this time the process was more controlled, more deliberate. Outside, the assembled team watched in awe as the energy field surrounding Jake and Tara took on a visible form. It resembled a cocoon of intertwining strands, reminiscent of human and Acamarian DNA. The sight was both beautiful and unnerving. Dr. Reed leaned in close to the observation window, his eyes wide with fascination. Look at the way their genetic structures are interacting, he breathed. It's like they're rewriting their own DNA in real time. As the experiment progressed, its effects began to ripple outward. The crystalline structures across Acamar Prime's surface started to grow and change shape, forming patterns that mirrored the DNA strands surrounding Jake and Tara. Dr. Voss rushed to a nearby console, his face pale as he read the incoming data. Seismic activity is dropping dramatically, he announced. The planet's core, it's stabilizing at an unprecedented rate. Governor Hawthorne frowned, concern etched on his face. What does this mean for the planet's habitability? Before anyone could respond, Captain Stryker let out a gasp. He stared at his hands in disbelief as faint patterns of bioluminescence began to form on his skin. Beside him, Nyla's tentacles twitched and moved with newfound dexterity. What's happening to us? Stryker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Novak turned to them, her eyes widening. It seems the effects of Jake and Tara's transformation are spreading to other bonded pairs. This is unexpected. As the scientists grappled with this new development, Admiral Frost observed the proceedings from her command center. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the data streaming in from the experiment. Begin covert data collection immediately, she ordered her team. I want every aspect of this hybridization process documented and analyzed. We need to understand its potential applications. Back in the chamber, Jake and Tara's merged form began to stabilize. The cocoon of energy surrounding them pulsed one final time, before slowly dissipating. As it faded, their bodies separated, revealing their drastically altered appearances. Jake now possessed retractable, tentacle-like appendages similar to Tara's breeding tentacles. They emerged from his back, moving with fluid grace, as if they had always been a part of him. Tara's skin, once a uniform shade, now displayed intricate patterns of bioluminescence that shifted and changed with her moods. As they opened their eyes, both Jake and Tara gasped. Their minds were flooded with sensations and information, not just from each other, but from the planet itself. They could feel the ebb and flow of Akamar Prime's energy, the pulse of its stabilizing core, the growth of the crystalline structures across its surface. We can hear it, Jake said, his voice filled with wonder. The planet, it's alive. It's trying to communicate with us. Tara nodded, her tentacles swaying gently. We are connected to everything now. The planet, the crystals, the other bonded pairs. It's all part of a greater whole. As Jake and Tara adjusted to their new abilities, tension was mounting outside the facility. Victor Kane, the charismatic leader of the Purist movement, stood before a large crowd in the main human settlement. His voice boomed through loudspeakers, amplifying his message of fear and division. Look at what's happening to our world, Kane shouted, gesturing towards the crystalline structures visible on the horizon. These alien growths are corrupting our planet, our people. We must stand against this unnatural union of species before it's too late. The crowd roared in response, their anger and fear palpable. A group of extremists, emboldened by Kane's words, broke away from the main protest. They headed towards a nearby crystalline structure, armed with makeshift weapons and explosives. As the Purists approached their target, Jake and Tara sensed the impending threat. Without a word, they reached out with their minds, establishing a planet-wide telepathic network connecting all bonded human Akamarian pairs. Through this network, they coordinated a response. Bonded pairs across Akamar Prime moved to protect the crystalline structures, using their newly enhanced abilities to create barriers and divert the attackers. Captain Stryker found himself instinctively manipulating nearby crystals, forming a protective wall around the threatened structure. Nyla, her mind attuned to the planet's electromagnetic field, disrupted the Purists' communication devices, sowing confusion among their ranks. As the situation escalated, Ambassador Zorn watched from his quarters, his face a mask of dismay. He activated his secure communication channel, connecting to the Akamarian High Council. Esteemed council members, Zorn began, his voice grave. The situation on Akamar Prime has spiraled beyond our control. The hybridization process is spreading, altering both humans and Akamarians in ways we cannot predict or contain. I urge you to consider severing all ties with the human colony and abandoning this world to its fate before it's too late. As Zorn's message was transmitted across the vast distances of space, a new arrival appeared at the research facility. Dr. Ilara Venn, an Akamarian xenobiologist specializing in rapid evolutionary adaptation, stepped out of her shuttle. Her eyes gleamed with curiosity as she took in the changed landscape of Akamar Prime. Dr. Reed hurried to greet her, relief evident on his face. Dr. Venn, thank you for coming on such short notice. We desperately need your expertise to understand what's happening here. As Dr. Venn was ushered into the facility, the doors to the experimental chamber slid open. Jake and Tara emerged, their bodies still adjusting to their new hybrid forms. The crystalline structures throughout the facility reacted to their presence, creating a dazzling display of light and energy. The assembled team watched in awe and trepidation as Jake and Tara stepped forward, their enhanced forms a living testament to the unprecedented changes sweeping across Akamar Prime. The air crackled with potential and uncertainty as everyone present realized that they stood at a crossroads, not just for their two species, but for the very future of life in the galaxy. As Jake and Tara stepped forward, the air around them crackled with energy. Suddenly, the research facility's lights flickered and surged, plunging the room into momentary darkness before blazing back to life with blinding intensity. Dr. Novak's eyes widened as she glanced at her monitors. Energy levels are off the charts. The crystalline structures are reacting to Jake and Tara's presence. True to her words, the crystals throughout the building began to pulse and grow at an alarming rate. Tendrils of crystalline material snaked across the walls and floor, rapidly expanding and reshaping the interior of the facility. Initiating emergency containment protocols, Dr. Novak shouted, her fingers flying across her control panel. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing off sections of the facility, but the crystals continued to grow, pushing through gaps and crevices. Jake and Tara, still adjusting to their transformed bodies, instinctively reached out to the expanding network. Jake's new tentacle-like appendages intertwined with Tara's breeding tentacles, creating a powerful connection. As they joined, their consciousness expanded, linking them not only to each other but to the very core of Akamar Prime. "We can feel it," Tara gasped, her voice resonating with newfound power. "The planet, it's alive, pulsing with energy." Jake nodded, his eyes glowing with an inner light. "We can control it, guide its growth." As the hybrid pair focused their efforts on stabilizing the crystal growth, Admiral Frost saw her opportunity. She tapped her communicator, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Team Alpha, move in. Breach the facility's security and access that chamber. We need that data." Frost's team, clad in sleek combat gear, moved swiftly through the chaos. As they approached the experimental chamber, however, they encountered unexpected resistance. The crystalline structures formed barriers, blocking their path and protecting Jake and Tara. "Ma'am, we can't get through," a soldier reported, his voice tinged with frustration. "The crystals are actively resisting us." Before Admiral Frost could respond, Governor Hawthorne burst into the room, flanked by a mixed group of human and Akamarian security forces. His face was a mask of barely controlled anger. "Admiral Frost, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Stand down immediately." The room crackled with tension as the two groups faced off, weapons at the ready. Jake and Tara, caught in the middle, continued their efforts to control the crystal growth, oblivious to the brewing conflict. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Voss rushed to a nearby console, his face pale. "Multiple attacks reported across Akamar Prime. The Purists are targeting research stations and crystalline formations." On the main screen, footage showed Victor Kane leading a group of Purists. They hurled makeshift explosives at a towering crystal structure, the blasts sending shards flying in all directions. "We must preserve the purity of our species," Kane's voice boomed through the speakers. "Destroy these alien abominations." As the attacks escalated, the planet itself seemed to recoil. A massive tremor shook the facility, knocking several people off their feet. Jake and Tara cried out in unison, their bodies convulsing as they felt the planet's pain. "The core," Jake gasped. "It's destabilizing again." As if in response to the planetary distress, Jake and Tara's bodies began to change once more. Crystalline patterns spread across their skin, hardening into a protective exoskeleton. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire as they interfaced directly with Akamar Prime's crystalline network. Captain Stryker and Nyla, their own abilities enhanced by the planet-wide changes, stepped forward. "We can help," Stryker said, his voice resonating with newfound authority. "We'll coordinate a defense against the purest attacks." Nyla nodded, her tentacles swaying with purposeful energy. "We can connect with other bonded pairs across the planet, form a defensive network." As Stryker and Nyla closed their eyes, focusing their efforts on the planet-wide response, Dr. Ilara Venn approached Dr. Reed and Dr. Novak. Her eyes gleamed with excitement and trepidation. "Doctors, I believe I have a solution," she said, her voice low and urgent. "But it's risky. We can use Jake and Tara's connection to initiate a controlled, planet-wide transformation. It could stabilize Akamar Prime once and for all." Dr. Reed's eyes widened. "You're talking about fundamentally altering the planet's ecosystem. The implications are staggering." Dr. Novak frowned, considering the proposal. "The potential benefits are enormous, but so are the risks. We'd be changing the very nature of life on this world." As the scientists debated, Ambassador Zorn slipped away from the chaos. In his private quarters, he activated a secure communication channel to Earth. "This is Ambassador Zorn," he said, his voice grave. "I must warn you of a potential threat. The hybridization process on Akamar Prime is out of control. The planet itself is transforming. We may need immediate military intervention." Outside the facility, the crystalline growth continued to spread, engulfing nearby structures and reshaping the landscape. Jake and Tara, now fully connected to the planet's systems, began to manipulate the crystals with precision. They created vast networks of tunnels and chambers within the growing formations, filled with a nutrient-rich atmosphere capable of sustaining both human and Akamarian life. Dr. Reed, observing this development, felt a spark of inspiration. "These crystal structures," he murmured, "they could be the key to our survival here. Self-sufficient communities, protected from the planet's instability." As word of the ongoing transformation spread, a new wave of volunteers arrived at the facility, humans and Akamarians alike, drawn by the promise of a new form of existence, sought to undergo the hybridization process. Governor Hawthorne, seeing the growing crowd, turned to his advisors. "We need a screening protocol immediately. We can't just let everyone undergo this process without proper vetting." As the situation on Akamar Prime grew more complex by the moment, Jake and Tara ascended to the top of the largest crystal formation. Their bodies, now a seamless blend of human, Akamarian, and crystalline elements, gleamed in the alien sunlight. From their vantage point, they surveyed the rapidly changing landscape of their adopted world. Jake turned to Tara, their breeding tentacles intertwining. "Can you feel it?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder and apprehension. "Something's happening deep within the planet." Tara nodded, her crystalline eyes reflecting the transformed world around them. "The core is shifting. Akamar Prime is about to change in ways we can't even imagine." As they stood together, the hybrid pair sensed the beginnings of a massive transformation. The very foundations of Akamar Prime trembled on the brink of a new era, one that would challenge the very definitions of human and Akamarian identity. As Jake and Tara stood atop the crystalline formation, their intertwined tentacles pulsing with energy, they felt a sudden, powerful tremor coursing through their bodies. The vibration resonated deep within Akamar Prime's core, sending waves of energy rippling across the planet's surface. "Jake, do you feel that?" Tara's voice was filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Jake nodded, his eyes widening as he sensed the magnitude of the change. "It's like the planet itself is evolving." The crystalline structures surrounding them began to vibrate, emitting a low, harmonic hum that grew in intensity. As the frequency aligned with the planet's core, Jake and Tara felt their bodies responding, changing in ways they couldn't have imagined. Their skin took on a translucent quality, revealing intricate patterns of bioluminescence beneath. Jake's newly formed tentacles elongated, becoming more agile and responsive. Tara gasped as her breeding tentacles tingled with heightened sensitivity, allowing her to perceive the planet's electromagnetic fields with startling clarity. As their transformation progressed, Jake experimentally reached out towards a nearby crystal formation. To his amazement, the structure began to reshape itself, responding to his mere thoughts. Tara joined him, and together they manipulated the crystals with unprecedented precision, creating complex, interwoven patterns. Down in the research facility, Dr. Reed watched the transformation unfold on the monitor screens. His eyes lit up with excitement as he turned to his team. "This is it! The breakthrough we've been waiting for. We need to start constructing habitation modules within these crystal formations immediately." As the research team sprang into action, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Novak's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "Multiple explosions detected at the outer perimeter. The Purists are launching a full-scale assault." Outside, Victor Kane led his followers in a relentless attack on the crystalline barrier surrounding the complex. The air filled with the sound of shattering crystal as makeshift explosives detonated against the structures. "Tear it all down," Kane shouted, his face contorted with rage. "We will not let these abominations destroy our future." Inside the facility, Governor Hawthorne's voice boomed over the emergency broadcast system. "Attention all personnel. We are now in a state of emergency. Implement defensive protocols immediately." Captain Stryker and Nyla rushed to coordinate the defense. Stryker's hands moved in fluid motions as he manipulated the crystalline structures, creating a series of interlocking barriers to reinforce the weakened areas. Beside him, Nyla focused intensely, her tentacles writhing as she projected electromagnetic interference to disrupt the Purists' communication devices. Amidst the chaos, Admiral Frost saw her chance. She nodded to her team, who began to move stealthily through the facility under the guise of providing military support. They deftly set up equipment designed to collect data on the hybrid transformation process, their true intentions hidden behind a facade of assistance. Dr. Alara Venn, observing the rapid changes in Jake and Tara from her workstation, suddenly sat up straight, her eyes wide with realization. She quickly pulled up a series of genetic scans, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she analyzed the data. "This is extraordinary," she muttered to herself before calling out to Dr. Reed. "Doctor, you need to see this. Jake and Tara's DNA. It's continuing to evolve, incorporating more elements from Akamar Prime's ecosystem. The implications are staggering." Dr. Reed hurried over, his brow furrowing as he studied the data. "What are you thinking, Dr. Venn?" Alara's eyes gleamed with excitement. "I believe they may be developing abilities that could allow them to influence the planet's core processes directly. We need to test this theory, and I have an idea how." She outlined her proposal to send Jake and Tara to one of the planet's most unstable regions, where they would attempt to stabilize a major fault line using their evolving abilities. Dr. Novak, overhearing the conversation, interjected with concern. "That's far too risky. We have no idea how their abilities might interact with such an unstable environment." Despite the objections, Governor Hawthorne, desperate for a solution to the planet's ongoing instability, gave the mission his approval. As preparations for the mission began, Jake and Tara descended from their crystalline perch, their transformed bodies glimmering in the alien light. They made their way through the facility, marveling at how their heightened senses allowed them to perceive the intricate network of energy flowing through the crystal structures. Dr. Reed approached them, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. "Jake, Tara, we have a critical mission for you. We believe your evolving abilities may be the key to stabilizing the planet's core. Are you willing to undertake this task?" Jake and Tara exchanged a look, their newly formed bond allowing them to communicate without words. They nodded in unison. "We're ready," Jake said, his voice resonating with newfound strength. As the hybrid pair prepared for their journey, Ambassador Zorn slipped away from the chaos unfolding in the facility. In the privacy of his quarters, he activated a secure communication channel, his fingers trembling slightly as he input the encryption codes. "General Kraz," Zorn spoke urgently into the transmitter. "The situation here has escalated beyond our worst fears. The hybridization process is spreading rapidly, changing the very fabric of our world. We need immediate intervention to halt this transformation before it's too late." Unaware of the looming threat from space, Jake and Tara set out on their mission to the unstable region. As they traveled, their connection to the planet deepened with each passing moment. They could sense the intricate web of fault lines and tectonic plates beneath the surface, feeling the tension building in the planet's crust. Arriving at their destination, they stood at the edge of a vast, fractured landscape. Fissures crisscrossed the ground, steam and noxious gases escaping from deep within the planet. Jake and Tara exchanged a determined look before reaching out with their minds and newly transformed bodies. As they began to manipulate the crystalline structures, attempting to create a stabilizing network, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The crystals responded to their efforts, growing and spreading at an exponential rate. A massive interconnected lattice began to form, spanning the unstable region. Back at the main facility, Dr. Reed and his team watched in awe as their monitors displayed the rapid growth of the crystalline network. Data streams flickered across screens, showing real-time changes in seismic activity and atmospheric composition. "It's working," Dr. Novak exclaimed, her earlier skepticism replaced by excitement. "The new growths are stabilizing the crust and altering the atmosphere. It's becoming more hospitable for the hybrid species." As news of these changes spread, the facility was inundated with volunteers seeking to undergo the hybridization process. Governor Hawthorne, overwhelmed by the increasing demand, hastily implemented a lottery system to manage the applicants. Meanwhile, Jake and Tara stood at the heart of the transformed landscape, their bodies humming with energy as they directed the growth of the crystalline network. Suddenly, they both stiffened, their senses picking up a disturbance high in the atmosphere. "Jake," Tara said, her voice tight with concern, "do you feel that?" Jake nodded, his expression grim. "Something's coming. Something big." As they peered up at the sky, they caught glimpses of light reflecting off metal, an approaching fleet of ships. The realization hit them simultaneously. Their evolving world faced a new imminent threat from above. "We need to warn the others," Jake said urgently. "Come on!" As Jake and Tara raced back towards the main facility, the crystalline structures around them pulsed with nervous energy, reflecting the growing tension on Akamar Prime. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath, poised on the brink of yet another transformation, one that would determine the fate of this new hybrid world. Species. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath, poised on the brink of yet another transformation, one that would determine the fate of this new hybrid world. As Jake and Tara raced back towards the main facility, they quickly realized that their journey would not be as straightforward as they had hoped. The landscape had transformed dramatically in their absence, with towering crystalline formations creating a labyrinthine terrain that stretched as far as the eye could see. "This is incredible," Jake marveled, his voice a mixture of awe and frustration. "But how are we going to get through?" Tara's eyes narrowed in concentration, her newly enhanced senses probing the crystalline maze before them. "I can feel the electromagnetic currents flowing through the structures," she said. "Maybe we can use them to guide us." Jake nodded, reaching out with his mind to connect with the nearest crystal formation. As he focused, the structure began to shift and reshape itself, creating a narrow passage. "I think I can clear a path, Kutunt," he said, his voice strained with effort. "But it's taking a lot of concentration. Can you navigate?" Tara nodded, her tentacles quivering as she attuned herself to the electromagnetic fields pulsing through the crystal network. "Follow me," she said, setting off into the newly formed passage. As they made their way through the ever-shifting crystal maze, Jake manipulated the structures around them, creating bridges over chasms and tunnels through solid barriers. Tara's electromagnetic sense guided them unerringly toward the research facility, her newfound abilities allowing her to perceive the shortest route through the complex terrain. Meanwhile, at the research facility, Dr. Reed and his team watched in amazement as their monitors displayed the rapid changes sweeping across Akamar Prime. The crystalline growths that Jake and Tara had initiated were spreading at an exponential rate, stabilizing fault lines and altering the planet's atmosphere. "Look at these readings," Dr. Novak exclaimed, pointing to a display showing atmospheric composition. "The oxygen levels are increasing, and the temperature is stabilizing. It's becoming more hospitable for both humans and Akamarians." As the scientists marveled at the data, Governor Hawthorne found himself facing a new crisis. The number of applicants for the hybridization process had skyrocketed, far outstripping the facility's capacity to process them. "We need a more rigorous screening process," Hawthorne declared to his advisors. "Set up a series of physical and psychological tests. We need to identify those who are most likely to adapt successfully to the transformation." The implementation of these new criteria created immediate tension among the applicants. Those who failed to meet the standards began to protest, their anger and frustration adding to the already volatile atmosphere surrounding the facility. Amidst the growing chaos, Admiral Frost saw an opportunity to further her own agenda. She discreetly dispatched a team of Earth military scientists to collect samples from the new crystalline formations. "Focus on areas showing the most rapid growth," she instructed her team. "We need to understand the mechanisms behind this transformation. Earth's future may depend on what we discover here." As Frost's team moved out, Captain Stryker and Nyla were busy coordinating the defense against the ongoing Purist attacks. Using their enhanced abilities, they created a network of crystal-based early warning systems around the facility's perimeter. "These should give us advance notice of any incoming threats," Stryker explained to Nyla as they finished calibrating the last sensor. "Now we just need to—" His words were cut off by a sudden alarm blaring from the nearest crystal formation. Stryker's eyes widened as he interpreted the signal. "They're coming again," he said grimly, "and this time they've got heavy weapons." As Stryker and Nyla rushed to organize the defense, Jake and Tara finally emerged from the crystal maze on the outskirts of the research facility. They were immediately greeted by a group of newly transformed hybrids, led by a familiar face that had been radically altered. "Dr. Reed?" Jake asked, stunned by the scientist's appearance. Reed's skin now pulsed with intricate patterns of bioluminescence, and his body showed a harmonious blend of human and Acamarian features. Reed nodded, a smile playing across his transformed face. "Welcome back, Keenan Malwine, Naren Heinermuchterd. You've missed quite a bit while you were gone. We've established the first hybrid community within the crystal structures, and the local flora and fauna are starting to adapt to the changes you initiated." As Jake and Tara absorbed this news, preparing to warn the others about the approaching Acamarian fleet, they were interrupted by the emergence of another figure from a nearby crystal formation. Dr. Lyra Novak stepped into view, her body partially transformed, a blend of human and hybrid features. "Dr. Novak!" Tara exclaimed. "What happened to you?" Novak's eyes, now flecked with crystalline structures, met Tara's gaze. "I volunteered for a partial hybridization," she explained. "I needed to understand the process from the inside. But now, I fear we may have opened a Pandora's box." The arrival of Novak with her partially hybrid state sparked an immediate debate among the group. Some argued for caution and further study, while others pushed for full integration with Akamar Prime's evolving ecosystem. Their discussion was abruptly cut short by the sound of explosions in the distance. Victor Kane and his Purist forces had launched their most daring attack yet, attempting to penetrate the heart of the research facility and destroy the central crystal node. Jake and Tara exchanged a quick glance, their bodies already humming with energy. Without a word, they sprang into action, their hybrid abilities allowing them to merge with the surrounding crystal structures. As they did so, other hybrids followed suit, forming a living shield of crystalline armor around the facility. The Purist's weapons fire ricocheted off the shimmering barrier, unable to penetrate the merged hybrid defenses. From within the crystal structure, Jake could sense the attackers' movements, directing the other hybrids to reinforce weak points in their defense. As the attack was repelled, Governor Hawthorne watched in awe from the facility's command center. The display of power and unity among the hybrids finally convinced him of the path forward. "This is it," he murmured. "This is how we survive on Akamar Prime." With the immediate threat neutralized, Jake and Tara separated themselves from the crystal structure, their bodies still crackling with energy. They turned to face the assembled leaders, including Governor Hawthorne, Admiral Frost, and the remaining Akamarian officials. "We have urgent news," Jake began, his voice carrying the weight of their discovery. "There's an Akamarian fleet approaching Akamar Prime. We don't know their intentions, but given everything that's happened here, we need to prepare for any possibility." The news sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Governor Hawthorne immediately called for an emergency meeting of all faction leaders to formulate a response to this new threat. As the leaders filed into the facility's main conference room, Jake and Tara exchanged a worried glance. They knew that the decisions made in the coming hours would shape not only their own future, but also the future of human-Acamarian relations and the very nature of life on this rapidly evolving world. The conference room doors sealed shut behind them, leaving the fate of Acamar Prime hanging in the balance as the hybrid planet braced itself for yet another transformative encounter. As the conference room doors sealed shut, the atmosphere inside grew thick with tension. Jake and Tara stood at the center of attention, their bodies still crackling with residual energy from their recent merge with the crystal structures. Governor Hawthorne called the emergency meeting to order, his voice grave. "We face an unprecedented threat. Jake and Tara have reported an approaching Acamarian fleet. We must decide on a course of action immediately." As the governor spoke, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation spreading across his skin. He glanced down at his arms, noticing that his flesh had taken on a translucent quality. Beneath the surface, intricate networks of glowing veins pulsed with an otherworldly light. Tara gasped softly beside him, her eyes wide as she observed her own transformation. Her breeding tentacles, once neatly tucked against her body, now writhed and multiplied, growing more numerous and agile by the second. Jake's newly formed tentacles twitched and curled, suddenly hyper-aware of the electromagnetic fields permeating the room. He could sense the electrical impulses of every nervous system present, a cacophony of bioelectrical signals threatening to overwhelm him. As the assembled leaders debated strategies, Admiral Frost stood up abruptly, her face set in a grim mask of perseverance. "Before we proceed, there's something you all need to know," she announced, her voice cutting through the din. The room fell silent as Frost continued. "I have been collecting data on the hybridization process for Earth's military. Our planet's survival may depend on understanding and replicating these transformations." Her words sparked an immediate uproar. Governor Hawthorne thumped his hand on the table, his face flushed with anger. "You've been spying on us? Exploiting our research for military gain? I demand your immediate removal from this planet." As accusations flew and tempers flared, Jake and Tara found themselves drawn to each other. Their breeding tentacles instinctively reached out, intertwining in a complex dance of flesh and energy. A powerful field of energy erupted from their joined bodies, spreading throughout the room in concentric waves. The arguing factions fell silent, stunned by the display of raw power emanating from the hybrid pair. All eyes turned to Jake and Tara, whose bodies now pulsed with an intense, otherworldly glow. Dr. Ilara Venn, who had been observing the pair intently, stepped forward. "I believe I have a solution," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Jake and Tara's connection to Acamar Prime's core could be our salvation. We could use their abilities to create a planetary defense system." She turned to address Jake and Tara directly. "If you can manipulate the crystalline structures on a global scale, we might be able to form a massive energy shield around the planet. It could potentially repel the Acamarian attack." Governor Hawthorne, his earlier anger giving way to desperate hope, nodded his approval. "Do it," he said. "It's our best chance." Within minutes, Jake and Tara were escorted to a newly constructed crystalline chamber, its walls humming with potential energy. As they stepped inside, their bodies began to merge with the surrounding structures. Their consciousness expanded, reaching out to encompass the entire planetary network of crystals. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Captain Stryker and Nyla led a team of hybrid volunteers in fortifying the planet's defenses. Their enhanced abilities allowed them to manipulate the crystalline growths, creating a network of energy-absorbing structures capable of neutralizing weapons fire. As Jake and Tara's shared consciousness spread across the planet, they sensed something unexpected deep within Acamar Prime's core. A dormant intelligence, ancient and alien, stirred in response to their presence. This entity, neither human nor Acamarian, pulsed with primordial energy, revealing itself as the source of the planet's unique properties. The awakening of this intelligence triggered a cascade of changes across Acamar Prime. Crystalline structures pulsed with newfound energy, accelerating the growth of hybrid flora and fauna. Vast stretches of previously uninhabitable terrain transformed, sprouting lush vegetation and developing breathable atmospheres. With a surge of combined will, Jake and Tara activated the planetary shield. A massive iridescent barrier materialized around Akamar Prime, its surface rippling with complex patterns that mirrored their intertwined tentacles. As the Akamarian fleet entered the outer reaches of the solar system, General Kraz stared in disbelief at the shimmering barrier surrounding his homeworld. "Impossible," he muttered, before ordering a series of probing attacks to test the shield's strength. Energy weapons lanced out from the Akamarian ships, only to be absorbed and deflected by the pulsing shield. Each impact seemed to strengthen the barrier, the energy of the attack seamlessly integrated into its structure. On the planet's surface, Victor Kane and his purist followers launched a desperate assault on the main research facility. Their goal, to disrupt the power source feeding Jake and Tara's crystalline chamber and bring down the planetary shield. Dr. Xander Reed, his hybrid form now fully realized, coordinated the defense. His enhanced connection to the crystalline network allowed him to reshape the facility's layout at will, creating a maze of shifting corridors that left the attacking purists disoriented and separated. As the battle raged both in space and on the ground, Jake and Tara's consciousness continued to expand. They touched the minds of every living being on Akamar Prime, broadcasting a powerful empathic signal that shared their experiences and the true nature of the planet's transformation. The telepathic broadcast reached beyond the planet's surface, touching the minds of the Akamarian fleet. Confusion spread among the crews as they witnessed visions of the miraculous changes occurring on their homeworld. Many began to question General Kraz's orders, torn between their duty and the awe-inspiring transformation of their planet. In the crystalline chamber, Jake and Tara's physical forms had almost completely merged with the structure. Their bodies pulsed with an intensity that threatened to overwhelm their individual consciousness. As they prepared to take the next step in their evolution, they sensed that this transformation would reshape not just themselves, but the entire planet and the future of human-Akamarian relations. The fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance as the planetary shield held firm against the weakening Akamarian assault. On the surface, the battle between hybrids and purists reached a fever pitch, and at the heart of it all, Jake and Tara stood on the precipice of a transformation that would alter the course of history for both their species and the planet they now called home. Home. As Jake and Tara's consciousness expanded within the crystalline chamber, their physical forms underwent a startling metamorphosis. Jake's skin took on a shimmering quality, developing a scale-like texture that caught the light in mesmerizing patterns. Tara's features, once a blend of human and Akamarian, became more distinctly human-like, yet retained an otherworldly beauty. Their tentacles, now more numerous and agile, intertwined in an intricate dance, forming a complex neural network that pulsed with energy. This living circuitry extended throughout the chamber, connecting them more deeply to the planet's core. Suddenly, a presence made itself known in their shared mindscape. It wasn't a voice, but a series of vivid mental images and sensations that flooded their consciousness. Through this alien form of communication, they learned of an ancient entity dwelling within Akamar Prime's core, a planetary consciousness that called itself Gaia Prime. Gaia Prime revealed its purpose. For millions of years, it had guided the evolution of life on Akamar Prime, patiently waiting for a species capable of fully integrating with the planet's unique ecosystem. In Jake and Tara, it had found the perfect amalgamation of human ingenuity and Akamarian adaptability. As this knowledge settled into their minds, Jake and Tara felt their bodies adapting further. They discovered they could manipulate the crystalline structures at a molecular level, reshaping them with a mere thought. Experimentally, they reached out with their newfound abilities, feeling the expanse of the planet's surface. With a shared intention, they began to create. Vast, habitable crystal domes sprouted across Akamar Prime's previously uninhabitable regions. These structures rose from the ground with astonishing speed, their surfaces shimmering with an inner light that promised safety and sustenance for future inhabitants. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, the battle between hybrid defenders and purist forces reached its climax. Dr. Xander Reed, his hybrid form allowing him unprecedented control over the crystalline environment, led the defense of the main research facility. He shaped the very ground beneath their feet, creating a network of crystal tunnels that allowed the hybrid forces to outmaneuver their opponents. Victor Kane, his face twisted with desperation, rallied his remaining forces for a final push. "The chamber is our only target now," he barked, hefting an experimental weapon designed to disrupt crystal structures. "If we can take out those freaks, this whole house of cards comes tumbling down." As Kane's elite squad approached the heart of the facility, Jake and Tara sensed the impending threat. Through their connection to the planetary network, they sent out a silent alarm to Captain Stryker and Nyla. The hybrid defenders responded immediately, converging on the purist's position from multiple directions. The resulting clash unfolded in a constantly shifting crystal labyrinth. Walls rose and fell, passages opened and closed, as both sides utilized their unique abilities to gain the upper hand. Energy weapons flashed, illuminating the translucent corridors with bursts of destructive light. In orbit, the situation aboard the Akamarian fleet grew increasingly tense. General Kraz watched with mounting frustration as several ships broke formation, their crews swayed by the empathic broadcasts emanating from the planet below. Gritting his teeth, he issued new orders to his remaining loyal vessels. "Concentrate all fire on Grid Sector 7 Alpha," he commanded. "We'll punch through their defenses if it's the last thing we do." The loyal ships complied, focusing their energy weapons on a single point of the planetary shield. The barrier shimmered and flexed under the assault, its integrity beginning to waver. In the crystalline chamber, Jake and Tara felt the strain on the shield like a physical blow. Through their connection with Gaia Prime, they realized that maintaining the barrier was draining vital energy from the planet's core. If they didn't act soon, Akamar Prime itself could become destabilized. Working in perfect unison, they began to modify the shield's structure. Instead of a simple barrier, it evolved into a complex adaptive energy field. As the Akamarian weapons impacted the new shield, it absorbed and redirected the energy, sending out pulses that interfered with the attacking ship's systems. Aboard his flagship, General Kraz stared in disbelief as his weapon's effectiveness plummeted. Several ships experienced power fluctuations, forcing them to retreat to a safe distance. "Impossible," he muttered, echoing his earlier sentiment as he watched his carefully laid plans crumble before his eyes. As the immediate threat from orbit diminished, Jake and Tara made another astonishing discovery through their link with Gaia Prime. The unique properties of Akamar Prime weren't confined to the planet itself. They extended to its moons and the surrounding space. Excited by the possibilities this presented, they began to extend their influence beyond the planet's atmosphere. Massive crystalline structures began to grow from Akamar Prime's surface, reaching up into the sky. These space elevators, shimmering and translucent, stretched towards the stars, promising a new era of off-world expansion and resource abundance. As they worked, Jake and Tara became aware of a communication being received by Governor Hawthorne. Earth's central government had learned of Akamar Prime's transformation, and a delegation of high-ranking officials was en route to assess the situation firsthand. This news added yet another layer of complexity to the already volatile political landscape. Jake and Tara knew that their emergence from the chamber was imminent, and the decisions they would make in the coming hours would shape the future of not just Akamar Prime, but potentially the entire human-Akamarian relationship. Their bodies, now a perfect blend of human, Akamarian, and crystalline elements, hummed with power and possibility. As they prepared to face the various factions vying for control of the planet's future, they grappled with their new identities and the weighty responsibilities that came with their evolved state. The chamber's walls began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light. Jake and Tara, their tentacles still intertwined, turned their attention to the sealed entrance. It was time to emerge and confront the new reality they had helped create. As the door began to iris open, they steeled themselves for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that the fate of two species and an entire world rested on their shoulders. Shoulders. The moment had arrived to reveal themselves to the world they had reshaped. As the chamber's entrance irised open, Jake and Tara stepped forward, their bodies radiating an ethereal glow that illuminated the corridor before them. Their intertwined tentacles pulsed with energy, creating intricate patterns that danced across their shimmering skin. The transformation they had undergone was evident in every aspect of their beings, from Jake's scale-like texture to Tara's more pronounced human features. Governor Hawthorne stood at the forefront of the assembled group, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the hybrid pair. Behind him, the research team and military personnel exchanged hushed whispers, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. Jake and Tara moved in perfect unison, their steps silent as they approached the gathered crowd. As they drew closer, they extended their tentacles outward, manipulating the crystalline structures around them. The air shimmered, and suddenly a three-dimensional, holographic display of Akamar Prime materialized before the onlookers. The hologram showcased the planet's dramatic transformation. Vast networks of crystalline structures crisscrossed the surface, connecting the newly formed habitable zones. Space elevators stretched skyward, their translucent forms disappearing into the planet's upper atmosphere. The assembled group gasped collectively, finally grasping the full scope of the changes that had occurred. Governor Hawthorne stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Jake, Tara, what you've accomplished is beyond our wildest expectations. Can you explain what's happened to you, to the planet? Before they could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Xander Reed's voice crackled over the communication system. We've contained most of the purest forces, but Kane's making a final push toward the central hub. Jake and Tara exchanged a glance, their newfound connection allowing them to communicate without words. They turned their attention to the crystalline network, sensing the vibrations of the ongoing battle. Through their link, they observed Dr. Reed manipulating the facility's layout, creating a maze of crystal barriers to impede Kane's progress. Suddenly, a high-frequency pulse rippled through the network, causing nearby crystals to vibrate violently. Jake and Tara winced in unison, feeling the strain on the structures as if it were their own bodies. Kane's activated some kind of destabilizing device, Jake said, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. We need to act quickly. Without hesitation, Jake and Tara extended their influence through the crystalline network. Their tentacles became more animated, wrapping around each other with increased intensity as they channeled their shared energy into the task. They began to alter the molecular composition of the affected structures, reinforcing them against the harmful frequencies. The assembled group watched in amazement as the vibrating crystals stabilized, their surfaces taking on a more resilient sheen. Jake and Tara's bodies glowed brighter, the effort of their intervention evident in the pulsing of their tentacles. As they worked to counteract Kane's device, an alert chimed on Governor Hawthorne's communication pad. He glanced down, his eyebrows rising as he read the message. We're receiving a transmission from General Kraz's flagship, he announced. They're calling for a ceasefire. Jake and Tara, their immediate task complete, turned their attention to the governor. The empathic broadcast we sent out earlier, Tara explained, her voice carrying an ethereal quality. It seems to have had a significant impact on the Akamarian forces. Governor Hawthorne nodded, processing the information. And what of the Earth delegation? They'll be arriving soon, and we need to be prepared. Jake and Tara shared another silent exchange before responding. We can use one of the space elevators to create a reception area, Jake suggested, a neutral ground for discussions about Akamar Prime's future. As they spoke, their bodies continued to evolve. New sensory organs developed along their tentacles, allowing them to perceive their environment in ways that defied conventional understanding. They could feel the pulse of the planet beneath them, the ebb and flow of energy through the crystalline network. Dr. Alara Venn, who had been observing the pair intently, stepped forward. If you're willing, I'd like to conduct some non-invasive tests, she said, her scientific curiosity evident in her tone. Understanding your physiology could be crucial for the future development of human Akamarian hybrids. Before Jake and Tara could respond, Governor Hawthorne interjected. We'll have time for scientific inquiry later. Right now, we need to focus on the diplomatic situation. He turned to the hybrid pair. Given your unique status and connection to the planet, would you be willing to act as ambassadors during the upcoming negotiations? Jake and Tara considered the request, feeling the weight of responsibility settling upon them. They were no longer just individuals, but representatives of a new form of life, a bridge between species and worlds. "We accept," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing in a way that sent shivers through the assembled group. As preparations for the diplomatic meeting began in earnest, Jake and Tara turned their attention to the space elevator. Using their newfound abilities, they began to shape an orbital facility at its apex, creating a grand reception area that would serve as the stage for discussions that could reshape the future of human-Acamarian relations. The transformed Acamar Prime glowed beneath them, its crystalline surface shimmering with untold possibilities. As they worked, Jake and Tara sensed the approaching Earth delegation entering the system. The next chapter in the planet's history was about to unfold, and they stood at its center, their tentacles intertwined, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ahead, their tentacles intertwined, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they continued their preparations, Jake and Tara felt a sudden jolt through their connection to the planetary network. The space elevator shuddered, its crystalline structure vibrating with an intensity that threatened to tear it apart. Alarm coursed through their hybrid bodies as they realized the source of the disturbance, a massive surge of energy emanating from Acamar Prime's core. "Something's wrong," Jake said, his voice tight with concentration. "The planet's core is destabilizing." Tara nodded, her luminescent skin pulsing with urgency. "We need to act fast. If we don't stabilize the elevator, the Earth delegation won't be able to dock." Without hesitation, they extended their tentacles, wrapping them around the nearest crystalline pillars. Energy flowed from their bodies into the structure, reinforcing its molecular bonds. The elevator's vibrations began to subside, but Jake and Tara could feel the strain of their efforts. On the planet's surface, chaos erupted as the crystalline growths accelerated their expansion. Entire regions were engulfed in a matter of hours, forcing the evacuation of newly established hybrid communities. Governor Hawthorne's voice crackled over the communication system, his tone urgent but controlled. "Dr. Reed, we need to evacuate the southeastern quadrant immediately. Use the crystal tunnels to move people to safety." Dr. Xander Reed's response came swiftly. "Understood, Governor. We're rerouting the tunnels now to accommodate the influx." As the evacuation efforts unfolded, a new presence entered the fray. Dr. Mira Jones emerged from one of the adaptation centers, her skin adorned with faint, glowing patterns, the first signs of her controlled hybridization. She quickly made her way to the central research facility, where Dr. Ilara Venn was analyzing data streams. "Dr. Venn," Mira called out as she entered the lab, "I think I might have an explanation for the sudden instability." Before Dr. Venn could respond, an alert blared through the facility. The approaching Earth delegation had halted their approach, their ships hovering just beyond the space elevator's docking area. Admiral Helena Frost's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression a mix of concern and suspicion. "Governor Hawthorne, what in blazes is going on down there? We're reading massive energy fluctuations from the planet's surface." Jack and Tara, still focused on stabilizing the elevator, projected a holographic image of themselves into Admiral Frost's ship. Their translucent forms shimmered as they addressed the delegation. "Admiral Frost," Jake began, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "We apologize for the unexpected situation. We're currently working to stabilize a surge of energy from the planet's core." Tara continued seamlessly. "We assure you, we have the situation under control. The space elevator will be safe for docking shortly." As they spoke, a new threat emerged from the Acamarian fleet. Commander Vex, leading a group of mutinous officers, had seized control of a destroyer and its fighter complement. The rogue ships broke away from the main fleet, their weapons charging as they set course for Acamar Prime. General Kraz's voice boomed over the intercom, his tone filled with impossibly strong fury. "Commander Vex, stand down immediately. This is a direct violation of our ceasefire agreement." Vex's response was defiant. "The only agreement that matters is our duty to the Acamarian people. We will not stand idly by while our world is transformed beyond recognition." The rogue ships launched a barrage of energy weapons, targeting the largest crystalline structures on the planet's surface. The impact shattered several key nodes in the planetary network, sending shockwaves through the entire system. Jake and Tara felt the attack as if it were against their own bodies. They redoubled their efforts to stabilize the space elevator, their tentacles pulsing with increasing intensity. As they channeled more energy, visible changes began to manifest in their physiology. Their tentacles grew longer and more numerous, while their skin took on a more pronounced crystalline texture. Governor Hawthorne's voice cut through the chaos. Captain Stryker, Nyla, coordinate with General Kraz's loyal ships. We need to form a defensive perimeter around the planet. As the space battle erupted overhead, Dr. Mira Jones worked feverishly with Dr. Venn and Dr. Reed in the research facility. Her expertise in rapid evolutionary adaptation proved invaluable as they sought to understand the planet's accelerated changes. The hybridization process has created a feedback loop, Dr. Jones explained, her fingers flying over holographic displays. The transformed flora and fauna are producing excess energy, which is feeding back into the planet's core. Dr. Venn's eyes widened as she processed the information. And that's causing the destabilizing surges. But how do we stop it? Dr. Jones's eyes gleamed with the intensity of scientific breakthrough. The space elevators, we can use them as conduits to channel the excess energy directly into orbital solar collectors. As the scientists worked on their solution, Jake and Tara made a startling discovery. Massive, tentacle-like structures of pure crystal were emerging from the planet's surface, reaching toward the sky. These colossal formations, miles long and pulsing with energy, seemed to be Akamar Prime's attempt to establish a direct connection with the space elevators and orbital facilities. Jake and Tara exchanged a look of understanding. They realized that to save Akamar Prime and ensure the success of the hybridization process, they would need to take drastic action. Their bodies, now more crystal than flesh, hummed with the planet's energy. We have to fully merge with the crystalline network, Tara said, her voice resonating with the weight of their decision. Jake nodded, his crystalline features reflecting the light of the ongoing battle above. It's the only way to stabilize the planet and complete the transformation. As they prepared for this final, irreversible step, the massive crystal tentacles continued their ascent towards the embattled ships in orbit and the waiting Earth delegation. The fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance, with Jake and Tara standing at the precipice of a transformation that would reshape not just their own existence, but the future of an entire world. Their bodies began to shimmer and dissolve, merging with the crystalline structures around them. As they fused with Akamar Prime's network, Jake and Tara felt their consciousness expand, encompassing the entire planet. The massive crystal tentacles continued their ascent, stretching beyond the atmosphere and reaching towards the space elevators and orbiting ships. They formed an intricate web-like structure in the planet's upper atmosphere, pulsing with energy and casting an otherworldly glow across the surface. In the main research facility, Dr. Mira Jones worked feverishly alongside Dr. Venn and Dr. Reed. Her fingers danced across holographic displays as she implemented her plan to channel the excess energy from the planet's core. We need to reconfigure the space elevators, she explained, her voice tight with urgency. They'll act as conduits, redirecting the power surges into the orbital solar collectors. Dr. Venn nodded, her eyes fixed on the data streams flowing across her screen. Initiating the energy redirection protocol now. As they worked, the space elevators began to glow with an intense, pulsating light. The excess energy from the planet's core flowed through the structures, alleviating the pressure building within Akamar Prime. Above the planet, the battle between loyal forces and Commander Vex's mutinous ships intensified. Captain Stryker and Nyla, their hybrid bodies adapting to the harsh conditions of space, led a daring assault on Vex's destroyer. Stryker's voice crackled over the comm system. Nyla, on my mark, use that debris cluster to our left. We'll create a barrier between us and their main cannons. Nyla's response was immediate. Ready when you are, Captain. With a synchronized effort, they extended their hybrid abilities, manipulating the nearby crystalline debris. The fragments coalesced into a makeshift shield, deflecting the destroyer's energy blasts and allowing them to close in on their target. On the planet's surface, Governor Hawthorne coordinated with Dr. Xander Reed, his voice strained as he issued rapid-fire orders. We need to expand the evacuation efforts. The crystal growth is accelerating faster than we anticipated. Dr. Reed's holographic image nodded grimly. I've identified several large, stable formations that can serve as temporary shelters. We're rerouting the crystal tunnels to guide people to these safe zones now. As the chaos unfolded planetside, Admiral Helena Frost made a bold decision aboard her ship. She turned to her first officer, her mind focused. Prepare for close approach. We're going to dock directly with one of those crystal tentacles. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but moved to comply. Frost's ship carefully maneuvered toward the nearest tentacle, its experimental docking system engaging with the living crystal structure. As they made contact, a surge of energy pulsed through the ship, temporarily disrupting its systems before stabilizing. Deep within Akamar Prime's core, Jake and Tara's merged consciousness encountered unexpected resistance. They sensed an ancient presence stirring, pushing back against their efforts to stabilize the planet. Gaia Prime, Jake's thoughts resonated through the crystalline network. It's awakening. Tara's response came instantly. We need to create a buffer zone to protect the hybrids. Focus on stabilizing the connection between them and the evolving ecosystem. Their shared consciousness spread through the planetary system, working to maintain the delicate balance between the hybridization process and Gaia Prime's ancient directives. In the main research facility, Dr. Alara Ven's eyes widened as she analyzed the latest data. We're detecting unknown energy signatures from the planet's core. It's as if the planet itself is fighting back against the transformation. Before she could elaborate, alarms blared throughout the facility. Commander Vex's remaining fighters had broken through the defensive perimeter and were heading straight for them. They're targeting our power core, Dr. Reed shouted, his hands flying over the control panel to reinforce the facility's shields. Just as the situation seemed dire, a massive Akamarian warship decloaked near the planet. Its commander, Admiral Zara, broadcast a message to all channels. This is Admiral Zara of the Akamarian High Command. We stand with Akamar Prime in its transformation. All loyal forces, engage the mutineers. The timely intervention shifted the tide of the space battle. Captain Stryker and Nyla seized the opportunity, launching a final assault on Vex's flagship. As the conflict raged above, the crystal tentacles on the planet's surface continued to grow, reaching heights that extended beyond the atmosphere. They began to form a lattice-like canopy over parts of Akamar Prime, creating a partial Dyson sphere that captured and redistributed solar energy across the planet's surface. Dr. Mira Jones, her body now adorned with glowing patterns as her hybridization accelerated, found herself able to interface directly with the crystalline structures. She closed her eyes, focusing her newfound abilities on fine-tuning the energy distribution system. I can feel the energy flows, she murmured, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality. I can redirect them, prevent overloads. As the situation in space stabilized, Admiral Frost's ship, still docked with the crystal tentacle, began to glow with an intense light. The Earth delegation, led by Frost, cautiously made their way into a newly formed crystal chamber within the structure. There they were greeted by holographic projections of Jake and Tara, their forms now more energy than matter. The hybrid pair's voices resonated through the chamber as they began to explain the full scope of Akamar Prime's transformation. What you're witnessing is more than just the evolution of a planet, Jake's projection said, his voice echoing with the power of the entire crystalline network. Tara's projection continued seamlessly. It's the birth of a new form of life, a symbiosis between human, Akamarian, and the planet itself. As they spoke, Jake and Tara initiated a planet-wide broadcast. Their message carried through the crystal network to every hybrid, human and Akamarian on and around the planet. The fate of two species and the future of interstellar relations hung in the balance as they prepared to reveal the next phase of Akamar Prime's evolution. Transformation. The holographic projections of Jake and Tara flickered, their forms shimmering with an otherworldly energy as they began their planet-wide broadcast. The crystalline structures across Akamar Prime pulsed in synchronization, carrying their message to every corner of the planet and beyond. What we are witnessing is the birth of a new form of consciousness. Jake's voice resonated through the network, each word reverberating with the power of the planet itself. Tara continued, her tone filled with awe and urgency. The hybrid population is becoming part of something greater. We are evolving into neural nodes within a vast, living network that spans the entire planet. As their words echoed through the crystal chambers and across the planet's surface, reactions varied wildly. In the Earth delegation's ship, still docked with one of the massive crystal tentacles, Admiral Helena Frost's expression hardened. She turned to her science officers, her voice low and tense. I want a full analysis of these crystalline structures. Look for weaknesses, potential methods of control. We need to understand the full scope of this transformation and its implications for Earth's interests. The officers nodded, their fingers flying over holographic displays as they began their work. Frost's gaze returned to the swirling patterns of energy visible through the ship's viewports, her mind racing with possibilities and potential threats. On the planet's surface, the crystal growths continued their relentless expansion. Governor Hawthorne's voice crackled over the emergency broadcast system, steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. Attention all citizens. We are expanding our evacuation efforts. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of your local authorities. We have identified safe zones within the larger crystal formations. These areas will serve as temporary shelters. Dr. Xander Reed worked alongside the governor, his hybrid form allowing him to interface directly with the growing crystal network. He manipulated holographic maps, redirecting crystal tunnels to guide people towards the newly established safe zones. The largest formation in Sector 7 is stabilizing, Reed reported. We can start moving people there immediately. As the evacuation efforts intensified, Dr. Mira Jones found herself at the heart of the transformation. Her body, now more crystal than flesh, hummed with the planet's energy. She stood in the center of the main research facility, her eyes closed in concentration as she interfaced directly with the crystalline network. I can see it all, she whispered, her voice taking on an ethereal quality. The energy flows, the growth patterns. I can control them. With a thought, she redirected a surge of power, threatening to overwhelm a nearby settlement. The crystal structures in the area stopped their rapid growth, stabilizing into elegant, habitable formations. In orbit, the space battle had finally come to an end. Captain Stryker and Nyla, their hybrid bodies adapting seamlessly to the vacuum of space, guided their ship back towards the planet's surface. As they descended, they noticed a massive crystalline structure forming around Akamar Prime's magnetic poles. Stryker to base, the captain's voice crackled over the comm system. We're detecting anomalous energy readings from the polar regions, requesting permission to investigate. Governor Hawthorne's response came swiftly. Permission granted, Captain. Take a team of hybrid specialists with you. We need to understand what's happening down there. As Stryker's team prepared for their mission, a new player emerged from one of the adaptation centers. Dr. Kai Nakamura, his body shimmering with a faint crystalline sheen, stepped out into the transformed landscape of Akamar Prime. His eyes, now flecked with iridescent particles, took in the swirling patterns of energy that suffused the air. Fascinating, he murmured, his mind already racing with calculations and theories. The neural network properties of this crystalline growth are beyond anything I could have imagined. Dr. Nakamura made his way to the main research facility, where he found Dr. Jones deep in communion with the planet's network. Without a word, he joined her, his partially hybridized form allowing him to tap into the flow of data and energy. Together, they began to map the complex interactions within the crystalline network, their combined expertise offering new insights into the planet's evolving consciousness. In orbit, Admiral Zara's Akamarian warship made contact with one of the massive crystal tentacles reaching into space. As the ship's systems interfaced with the alien structure, unexpected upgrades began to manifest. Weapon systems became more efficient. Power distribution optimized itself, and the ship's hull started to incorporate crystalline elements. By the ancestors, Zara breathed, watching in awe as her ship transformed before her eyes. This is beyond anything in our technological history. As the various factions grappled with the rapidly evolving situation, Jake and Tara's merged consciousness detected a disturbance in the planetary network. Pockets of resistance formed within the crystalline structures, areas where the alien intelligence known as Gaia Prime exerted its influence. We need to address this. Jake's thoughts resonated through the network. If left unchecked, these conflicting directives could destabilize the entire system. Tara's response came instantly. Agreed. We should inform the others. This will require a coordinated effort to determination. As if in response to their concern, the crystalline structures across Akamar Prime pulsed with renewed intensity. The massive tentacles reaching into space began to form complex geometric patterns, emitting powerful energy signatures that interfered with long-range communications and sensor systems. Admiral Frost, watching these developments from her ship, made a swift decision. Establish a quarantine zone around the planet, she ordered. Nothing gets in or out without our explicit authorization. As her crew moved to comply, Frost's gaze remained fixed on the shimmering surface of Akamar Prime. The planet's isolation from the rest of the galaxy was now near total, setting the stage for a crucial confrontation that would determine the future of not just Akamar Prime, but potentially the entire human-Akamarian alliance. The isolation of Akamar Prime set the stage for a crucial confrontation, but the planet's rapid evolution demanded immediate action. Governor Hawthorne, recognizing the urgency of the situation, called for an emergency summit within one of the crystal chambers of a newly formed space elevator. As delegates from various factions made their way to the meeting point, the crystalline structures pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Captain Stryker and Nyla, their hybrid bodies now fully adapted to the transformed environment, escorted key personnel through the shifting corridors. Upon entering the chamber, Admiral Frost's eyes widened at the sight of the pulsating walls. "This is unprecedented," she muttered, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. Governor Hawthorne stood at the center of the room, his face etched with concern. "Welcome, everyone. We face challenges beyond our wildest imaginations, but we must find a way forward together." As the delegates took their seats, Dr. Mira Jones stepped forward, her crystalline form shimmering under the ambient light. "I've made significant progress in stabilizing the energy distribution system," she began, projecting a holographic map of the planet's surface. The attendees watched in awe as Dr. Jones manipulated the projection with mere thoughts, showcasing how she had created safe zones for both hybrid and non-hybrid inhabitants. "By fine-tuning the crystal growth patterns, we can..." Her presentation was cut short by a sudden surge of energy that rippled through the chamber. The crystalline walls groaned and shifted, growing rapidly in jagged formations. Panic erupted as delegates scrambled to avoid the encroaching structures. In the chaos, a group of figures moved with purpose towards the elevator's control systems. Led by Colonel Marcus Graves, a hardline human military officer, they seized the moment to enact their plan. "For the purity of humanity," Graves shouted as he planted explosive devices at key structural points. Captain Stryker's enhanced senses picked up the disturbance immediately. "Nyla, we've got trouble," he said, gesturing towards the saboteurs. The hybrid pair sprang into action, their bodies flowing like liquid through the rapidly changing crystal maze. They pursued Graves and his team, using their newfound abilities to navigate the shifting landscape with ease. As alarms blared throughout the elevator shaft, the chase led them to the central power core. Stryker and Nyla cornered Graves and his team, the air crackling with tension and residual energy from the surrounding crystals. "Stand down, Colonel," Stryker commanded, his voice resonating with authority. "You're only making things worse." Graves sneered, his hand hovering over the detonator. "Worse? Look at what you've become. You're not even human anymore." On the planet's surface, Dr. Kai Nakamura worked feverishly with a team of hybrid technicians. They had identified several nodes where Gaia Prime's influence was strongest and were implementing countermeasures to isolate these areas. As they worked, the surrounding crystals became increasingly agitated. Sharp defensive formations sprouted from the ground, hindering their progress. Nakamura's partially hybridized form allowed him to interface with the structures, but the resistance was strong. "We need to hurry," he urged his team. "These formations are becoming more aggressive by the minute." In orbit, Admiral Frost's quarantine zone faced an unexpected challenge. The geometric patterns formed by the crystal tentacles began emitting powerful electromagnetic pulses, disrupting the Earthship's systems. "Mayday! Mayday!" crackled a panicked voice over the comm. "We're losing power and drifting towards the Dyson sphere." Frost's heart made as she assessed the situation. "Initiate emergency evacuation procedures," she ordered. "Redirect all available ships to rescue the affected crews." As chaos unfolded in space and on the surface, Dr. Ilara Venn made a breakthrough in the main research facility. Her eyes widened as she analyzed the latest data on Gaia Prime's resurgence. "It's trying to rewrite the hybrid genetic code," she gasped, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. "We need to distribute a protective measure through the crystalline network now." As Venn worked to implement her countermeasure, Jake and Tara's merged consciousness detected a critical mass building within Akamar Prime's core. The conflicting directives threatened to tear the planet apart. In response, they initiated an emergency protocol, channeling vast amounts of energy through the space elevators and crystal tentacles. The surge of power triggered a planet-wide transformation, reshaping Akamar Prime's very geography. Land masses shifted and changed, forming new continents optimized for the hybrid ecosystem. Oceans churned and transformed, their chemical composition altering to support evolving life forms. The partial Dyson sphere expanded rapidly, its structure becoming more complex and efficient. As the planet underwent this massive change, the hybrid population experienced a simultaneous evolution. Their bodies adapted to the new environment, developing enhanced abilities to interact with the crystalline structures. Dr. Jones, still in the midst of the emergency summit, felt the change ripple through her body. She raised her hand, marveling as nearby crystals responded to her will, reshaping themselves into intricate patterns. "This is incredible," she breathed, her voice filled with wonder and a hint of trepidation. The non-hybrid population faced a critical decision as the environment became increasingly hostile to their unaltered physiologies. Governor Hawthorne, working with Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura, quickly established shielded enclaves for those who chose not to undergo hybridization. As Akamar Prime emerged from its metamorphosis, it surfaced a shimmering expanse of crystalline structures and hybrid ecosystems. The space elevators stood as towering conduits of energy between the core and the Dyson sphere. In the midst of the transformation, Colonel Graves and his team vanished, their fate unknown amidst the chaos of the planet's rebirth. Captain Stryker and Nyla found themselves at the heart of a new world, poised on the brink of exploring the full potential of their transformed home. The hybrid population, now more in tune with their planet than ever before, looked to the horizon with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. As the dust settled on this new era for Akamar Prime, questions lingered about the future of human-Akamarian relations and the role this transformed world would play in the galaxy. Galaxy. The isolation of Akamar Prime set the stage for a crucial confrontation, but the planet's rapid evolution demanded immediate action. As the dust settled on Akamar Prime's dramatic transformation, the newly evolved hybrid ecosystem began to stabilize. The shimmering crystalline structures that now covered the planet's surface settled into intricate patterns, forming a vast network of energy conduits and habitats. Jake and Tara, their merged consciousness still intertwined with the planetary system, worked tirelessly to reassert control over the conflicting influences of Gaia Prime. In orbit, Admiral Helena Frost's quarantine fleet regrouped at a safe distance from the transformed planet. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, her brow furrowed as she studied the holographic display of Akamar Prime's new form. "Launch the probes," she ordered, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We need to gather as much data as possible on that new Dyson sphere and the planet's surface." As the unmanned probes approached the crystal tentacles extending into space, they encountered unexpected resistance. Localized energy fields emanated from the structures, disabling the device's propulsion systems and sending them spinning off course. "Admiral," her science officer reported, "the probes are being repelled. It seems the crystal formations have some kind of defensive capability." Frost nodded grimly. "Keep trying. We need to understand what we're dealing with here." On the planet's surface, Governor Hawthorne coordinated the relocation of non-hybrid populations to the shielded enclaves. He stood at the entrance of one such sanctuary, watching as a group of bewildered humans and Acamarians filed inside. "This way, please," he said, gesturing towards the reinforced structure. "Dr. Jones and her team have ensured your safety within these walls." Dr. Mira Jones led a group of hybrid engineers through the crystalline landscape surrounding the enclave. Her body shimmered with an otherworldly light as she manipulated the structures around her, creating a series of protective barriers. "Focus on filtering out the harmful energy," she instructed her team. "We need to maintain a stable environment for the non-hybrids." As Jones worked, Dr. Kai Nakamura and his hybrid technicians established a new command center within a massive crystal formation. The interior pulsed with bioluminescent light, reflecting off the faceted walls as they set up their equipment. Nakamura's eyes, now flecked with iridescent particles, scanned the holographic displays showing energy flows across the planet. "There," he pointed to several glowing red spots on the map. "These anomalies indicate pockets of resistance. Gaia Prime's influence is still strong in these areas." Meanwhile, Captain Stryker and Nyla embarked on a search and recovery mission, their hybrid senses attuned to the new crystalline environment. They moved with fluid grace through the transformed landscape, following faint traces of non-hybrid biosignatures. "I'm picking up something," Nyla said, her voice echoing slightly in the crystalline cavern they were exploring. "It's weak, but definitely human." Stryker nodded, his enhanced vision piercing the shadows ahead. "This way. Be ready for anything." They pressed on, descending deeper into the planet's crust until they reached a previously unknown underground chamber. As they entered, they found a group of purest survivors huddled together, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. Among them, barely conscious, lay Colonel Graves. "Medical team to our location," Stryker called into his communicator. "We found survivors in need of immediate attention." In orbit, Admiral Zara's Acamarian warship hovered near the edge of the quarantine zone. The ship's hull now incorporated crystalline elements, its systems partially integrated with the planet's network. Zara stood on the bridge, her form shimmering slightly as she interfaced with the ship's enhanced systems. "Open a channel to Admiral Frost," she commanded, her voice resonating with newfound authority. As the communication link established, Zara addressed her human counterpart. "Admiral Frost, we propose a joint scientific mission to study the transformed Akamar Prime. Our ship's unique integration with the crystal network could provide valuable insights." Frost considered the offer, weighing the potential risks against the need for information. After a moment, she nodded. "Agreed, but under strict containment protocols. I'll allow a small team of Earth scientists to visit the planet." Back on the surface, Dr. Alara Venn worked feverishly in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays and pulsing crystal equipment. She had successfully distributed the protective energy pulse throughout the hybrid population and now turned her attention to the remaining non-hybrids. "If we can modulate the hybridization process," she muttered to herself, manipulating complex molecular structures on her display, "we might be able to offer a more gradual transformation." As Venn refined her new procedure, Jake and Tara began the delicate process of withdrawing their consciousness from the planetary network. Within a specially designed crystal chamber at the heart of the main research facility, their physical forms slowly began to reconstitute. Energy flowed through the surrounding crystals, coalescing into humanoid shapes as Jake and Tara's merged consciousness separated into individual entities once more. The process was slow, their bodies reforming atom by atom as they drew on the vast energy resources of the transformed planet. Governor Hawthorne, recognizing the need for a new governance structure, called together representatives from various hybrid communities and the remaining non-hybrid populations. They gathered in a large crystal amphitheater, its walls shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. "We stand at the dawn of a new era for Akamar Prime," Hawthorne addressed the assembly. To navigate the challenges ahead, I propose the formation of a hybrid council. Together, we will establish protocols for integrating new arrivals and managing our planet's vast energy resources. As the council members began to discuss the intricacies of their new society, a more immediate threat loomed on the horizon. In the polar regions, the massive crystalline spire detected earlier continued to grow, reaching beyond the atmosphere and serving as a focal point for the planet's electromagnetic field. Dr. Nakamura and his team observed the structure from their command center, their expressions a mix of awe and concern. The energy patterns emanating from that spire are unlike anything we've seen before, one of the technicians reported. Nakamura nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. It seems to be playing a crucial role in maintaining the stability of Akamar Prime's new form. We need to understand its function before. His words were cut short as an alarm blared through the command center. The holographic display zoomed out to show the partial Dyson sphere surrounding the planet. The crystal tentacles were extending further into space, approaching the orbit of Akamar Prime's moons. "This is bad," Nakamura muttered, his fingers flying over the control panel. "If those tentacles disrupt the gravitational balance of our satellite system, we could be looking at catastrophic tidal effects." As the situation unfolded, the newly formed hybrid council found itself facing its first major crisis. The race was on to understand and control this new phase of growth before it destabilized the entire Akamarian system. As the crystal tentacles reached ever closer to Akamar Prime's moons, the hybrid council convened in the shimmering amphitheater. Governor Hawthorne's face was etched with concern as he addressed the gathered representatives. "We face an unprecedented crisis," he began, his voice echoing through the crystalline chamber. "Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura have developed a plan to stabilize the expanding Dyson sphere and prevent catastrophic tidal effects on our planet." Dr. Mira Jones stepped forward, her hybrid form glowing softly in the bioluminescent light. "We propose using the space elevators as conduits to redirect excess energy from the expanding tentacles back into Akamar Prime's core," she explained, manipulating a holographic model of the planet. As she spoke, Dr. Jones reached out with her enhanced abilities, her consciousness extending through the crystal network. She could feel the immense energy pulsing through the space elevators, and with careful precision, she began to reshape their internal structures. Dr. Nakamura, his eyes reflecting the complex data streams before him, added, "Simultaneously, we'll reprogram the planetary network to regulate the growth of the Dyson sphere. It's a delicate balance, but it's our best chance to maintain stability." In orbit, Admiral Helena Frost watched with growing unease as the crystal tentacles inched closer to her fleet. The bridge of her flagship hummed with tense activity as officers monitored the expanding structure. "Admiral," her second-in-command reported, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the tentacles. They're unlike anything we've seen before." Frost's eyes sharp. "Order the fleet to fall back to a safer distance. We can't risk direct contact with those formations." As the Earth ships began to retreat, alarms blared across the bridge. "Admiral, the CSS Galileo is reporting propulsion failure. They're drifting towards the tentacles." Frost's mind raced through possible solutions. "Deploy emergency tethers. We need to pull them back before—" Her words were cut short as a brilliant flash of light erupted from the planet's surface. The space elevators pulsed with blinding energy, their crystal structures reconfiguring under Dr. Jones's guidance. The surge of power flowed upward, interacting with the expanding tentacles and slowing their growth. On the planet's surface, Captain Stryker and Nyla emerged from a crystal transport, supporting the weakened form of Colonel Graves. A team of medical personnel rushed forward with hovering gurneys, quickly assessing the condition of the rescued purists. "Get them to Dr. Venn immediately," Stryker ordered, his voice tight with concern. "They've been exposed to high levels of transformative energy." As the medical team whisked the survivors away, Nyla turned to Stryker, her hybrid senses alert. "Something's changing," she murmured, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Can you feel it?" Before Stryker could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled. Crystal spires erupted from the earth, reaching skyward in a dazzling display of geometric precision. The air crackled with energy as the planet's transformation entered a new phase. In the specialized medical facility, Dr. Alara Venn worked feverishly to stabilize the purest survivors. Her modified hybridization process flowed through specialized equipment, bathing the patients in a soft, pulsating light. "Vital signs stabilizing," one of her assistants reported. "But doctor, look at this." Venn leaned in, her eyes widening as she observed crystalline structures forming beneath the skin of Colonel Graves. "Impossible," she whispered. "They haven't undergone full hybridization. This shouldn't be happening." In the main research facility, the crystal chamber housing Jake and Tara pulsed with increasing intensity. The merged consciousness of the two began to separate, coalescing into distinct physical forms. Their bodies took shape atom by atom, a perfect blend of human, Acamarian, and crystalline elements. As Jake and Tara's reformation accelerated, a new crisis unfolded in orbit. Commander Alexei Volkov, his hybrid body shimmering with anticipation, prepared to launch a daring rescue mission to save the CSS Galileo. "Crystal shuttle primed and ready," Volkov reported, his voice calm despite the high stakes. "Initiating launch sequence." The shuttle, a sleek fusion of Acamarian and Earth technology, streaked away from the planet's surface. Volkov's enhanced senses allowed him to navigate the treacherous space between the expanding tentacles with unnatural precision. As the rescue mission unfolded, Dr. Nakamura's efforts to reprogram the planetary network began to yield results. The growth of the crystal tentacles slowed, but the surge of redirected energy caused unexpected reactions across Akamar Prime's surface. In the polar regions, the massive crystalline spire that served as a focal point for the planet's electromagnetic field suddenly blazed with light. A powerful pulse of energy erupted from its apex, racing through the crystal network and temporarily disrupting communications planet-wide. Dr. Nakamura stumbled as the pulse washed over him, his hybrid senses overwhelmed by the raw power. "Status report," he called out, steadying himself against a crystal console. His team scrambled to analyze the data pouring in from across the planet. "The pulse is causing widespread fluctuations in the hybrid ecosystem," one technician reported. "We're seeing spontaneous crystal growth in previously unaffected areas." As the crisis deepened, Governor Hawthorne received an urgent communication from Admiral Zara's Acamarian warship. The holographic image of the Admiral flickered to life in the council chamber, her form partially integrated with crystalline structures. "Governor," Zara's voice resonated with newfound authority, "our long-range sensors have detected a massive object approaching the Acamarian system at high speed. Initial scans suggest it could be a rogue planet or an unknown celestial body." Hawthorne's face paled. "What could have drawn it here?" Zara's expression was grim. "We believe it's been attracted by the intense energy emissions from our expanding Dyson sphere. If it continues on its current trajectory, it will reach our system within days." As the implications of this new threat sank in, the crystal chamber housing Jake and Tara began to crack. Energy poured from the fissures as their physical forms solidified. With a final surge of power, the chamber shattered, revealing the newly reconstituted pair. Jake opened his eyes, now flecked with iridescent crystal, and met Tara's gaze. In that moment, they became aware of the multiple crises facing Akamar Prime. Without a word, they clasped hands, their hybrid forms resonating with the planet's energy. As they prepared to step out of the chamber and confront the challenges ahead, the fate of Akamar Prime, its hybrid population, and potentially the entire star system hung in the balance. The race against time to control the planet's transformation and face the approaching celestial intruder had only just begun. Jake and Tara stepped out of the shattered crystal chamber, their new hybrid forms radiating with power. They exchanged a knowing glance, their enhanced senses already attuned to the multiple crises facing Akamar Prime. Without hesitation, they moved in unison towards the central control hub. As they walked, their bodies seamlessly interfaced with the surrounding crystal structures, information flooding their minds through direct neural connections. Jake's consciousness expanded, encompassing the vast network of the expanding Dyson sphere. He could feel the pulsing energy of the crystal tentacles as they reached toward the moons. With a thought, he established a link with Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura. "I'm plugging into the system," Jake communicated telepathically. "We need to redirect the energy flow immediately." Dr. Jones's voice echoed in his mind. "Understood. We're ready to initiate the redirection through the space elevators." Jake closed his eyes, extending his awareness through the crystal network. He visualized the energy patterns, intricate webs of light and power stretching across space. With careful precision, he began to manipulate the flow, guiding excess energy back towards the planet's core. Tara, meanwhile, focused her attention on the approaching celestial object. She interfaced with the planetary sensor array, her hybrid physiology allowing her to process vast amounts of data in seconds. "This isn't a rogue planet," she announced, her voice carrying a hint of awe. "It's artificial, a massive constructed sphere." Governor Hawthorne's face paled at the news. He turned to the hybrid council, his voice firm despite the tension in the air. "Activate our defensive systems. We need to be prepared for any eventuality." As crystal-based energy projectors powered up around the planet, Commander Volkov's crystal shuttle approached the stranded CSS Galileo. The hybrid officer's enhanced reflexes allowed him to navigate the treacherous field of expanding tentacles with impossible precision. "Initiating docking procedures," Volkov reported, his voice calm despite the high-stakes situation. The crystal shuttle latched onto the Galileo's airlock with a satisfying thunk. Volkov and his team boarded the Earth vessel, finding the crew unconscious, their bodies bathed in the eerie glow of the surrounding energy field. "Med team, prepare for emergency evacuation," he ordered, lifting an unconscious crew member onto a hover stretcher. As the last of the Galileo's crew was transferred to the crystal shuttle, Volkov took one last look at the abandoned ship. The crystal tentacles began to envelop it, integrating the Earth vessel into the expanding structure. Back on the surface, Dr. Ilara Venn hunched over her workstation, her eyes widening as she analyzed the data from Colonel Graves and the other Purist survivors. "This is unprecedented," she muttered, fingers flying over the holographic display. The colonel's body twitched on the medical bed, crystalline structures visibly forming beneath his skin. Ven's mind raced as she formulated a new hybridization stabilization protocol. Suddenly, a brilliant beam of energy erupted from the polar spire, cutting through the atmosphere and into space. The hybrid council watched in stunned silence as the beam focused on the approaching artificial sphere. Jake and Tara exchanged a concerned look. "We need to investigate that spire," Jake said, his voice resolute. Tara nodded, already interfacing with the planet's transport network. "I've got our route plotted. We can use the crystal structures to move quickly." As they prepared to depart, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Venn's voice came over the comm system, urgency clear in her tone. "Emergency in the medical wing. Colonel Graves is merging with the surrounding crystals." Jake and Tara hesitated for a moment, torn between the immediate crisis and the larger threat looming in space. "We have to stick to the plan," Tara said firmly. "Dr. Venn can handle the situation here." With a shared nod of persistence, they plunged into the nearest crystal formation, their bodies seeming to phase through the solid structure. They moved at incredible speed, flashing through the planet's crystal network towards the polar region. As they neared their destination, they encountered unexpected resistance. Crystal formations pulsed with unfamiliar energy patterns, blocking their path and forcing them to navigate an increasingly treacherous route. "Something's different about these structures," Jake observed, narrowly avoiding a sudden crystal spike. "It's like they're actively trying to keep us out." Tara focused her hybrid senses, scanning the surrounding area. "I'm detecting energy signatures similar to what we encountered with Gaia Prime. Could there be a connection?" Before Jake could respond, they emerged at the base of the massive polar spire. Its surface crackled with electromagnetic energy, the air around them charged with potential. As they approached, the spire's energy emissions suddenly intensified. A blinding flash engulfed the area, momentarily overloading their enhanced senses. When their vision cleared, Jake and Tara found themselves face-to-face with an unexpected sight. At the base of the spire, a shimmering portal had materialized. Through its swirling surface, they could glimpse a landscape of intricate crystal formations, unlike anything they had seen on Akamar Prime. Jake and Tara exchanged a look of mingled excitement and apprehension. The portal before them represented a new mystery, one that could potentially hold the key to understanding the planet's transformation and the approaching artificial sphere. As they stood at the threshold of this new discovery, the fate of Akamar Prime hung in the balance. The challenges they faced were a long way to go, but with their newfound hybrid abilities and unwavering purpose, Jake and Tara prepared to step into the unknown. Jake and Tara stood at the threshold of the shimmering portal, its swirling surface reflecting the intricate crystal formations beyond. The air crackled with energy, sending shivers down their spines. "Ready?" Jake asked, his voice barely audible above the portal's low hum. Tara nodded, her eyes fixed on the enigmatic gateway. "Let's do this." As they took a step forward, the portal's energy field suddenly intensified. A powerful gravitational force gripped them, pulling them off their feet. Jake reached for Tara's hand, their fingers intertwining as they were yanked into the swirling vortex. "Jake! Tara!" Governor Hawthorne's voice echoed through the comm system, but it was too late. The hybrid pair vanished into the portal, leaving behind only a fading ripple of energy. Alarms blared throughout the facility as sensors registered the disappearance of Jake and Tara. Governor Hawthorne's face paled as he processed the implications. He turned to his staff, his voice firm despite the tension in his eyes. "Assemble a rescue team immediately. Get Captain Stryker and Nyla here now." Within minutes, Captain Stryker and Nyla arrived at the command center, their hybrid forms shimmering with anticipation. Governor Hawthorne briefed them quickly, his words clipped and urgent. "We don't know what's on the other side of that portal," he said, gesturing to the holographic display of the polar spire. "But we need Jake and Tara back. You two are our best hope for a successful retrieval." Stryker nodded, his expression grim. "We'll bring them home, sir." As the rescue team prepared for their mission, a new crisis unfolded in orbit. The artificial sphere that had been approaching Akamar Prime began to decelerate, its massive form casting a shadow over the planet's moons. Admiral Zara's voice crackled over the interstellar comm channel. "Governor, our sensors are detecting unusual activity from the sphere. Its surface is changing." The holographic display shifted, showing a real-time image of the sphere. Its once smooth surface was now rippling, intricate patterns forming and reforming in a hypnotic dance. Zara's voice held a note of awe as she continued her report. "The energy signatures, they match those of the polar spire. There's a connection here, Governor. I'm sure of it." Before Hawthorne could respond, an urgent call came in from the medical facility. Dr. Elara Ven's face appeared on screen, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "Governor, we have a situation with Colonel Graves," she said, her eyes darting to something off-screen. "The hybridization process, it's accelerated beyond our control." The camera panned to show Graves's bed. The colonel's body was now partially merged with the surrounding crystal structures, pulses of energy radiating from his form. Each pulse sent a visible wave through the nearby crystals, causing them to grow and shift. "His transformation is resonating with the planetary network," Ven explained, her fingers flying over a holographic console. "We're seeing localized disruptions in the crystal structures. If we can't contain this, the integrity of the entire facility could be compromised." As if in response to Ven's words, a tremor shook the medical wing. Cracks appeared in the walls as crystal formations pushed through, growing at an alarming rate. In the main research facility, Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura worked frantically to manage the sudden influx of data flooding their systems. Holographic displays flickered and glitched as the planetary network struggled to process the surge of information. "This is unprecedented," Nakamura muttered, his hybrid eyes scanning lines of code faster than any human could comprehend. "The data, it's rewriting parts of the ecosystem's base code." Jones nodded grimly, his fingers dancing over multiple interfaces. "If we don't regain control soon, we could lose the entire system." Outside the polar spire, Captain Stryker and Nyla led their team through the increasingly treacherous terrain. The crystal formations around them shifted and grew, creating a maze-like structure that seemed to change with each step. "Stay close," Stryker called out, his hybrid senses on high alert. "The crystals are reacting to our presence." Nyla moved gracefully through the shifting landscape, her body seeming to flow around obstacles before they fully formed. "I can feel the portal's energy," she said, her voice tinged with an otherworldly resonance. "It's pulsing, almost like a heartbeat." As they neared the base of the spire, the crystal formations grew more aggressive. Spikes erupted from the ground, forcing the team to use their hybrid abilities to leap and phase through solid matter. In orbit, Commander Volkov's crystal shuttle approached Admiral Frost's flagship, carrying the rescued crew of the CSS Galileo. The expanding Dyson sphere's energy field created a sea of interference, making their approach treacherous. "Navigation systems are offline," Volkov reported, his hands gripping the manual controls. "Attempting manual docking procedure." The shuttle weaved through a maze of energy tendrils, each near miss sending shivers through the vessel's crystal structure. Volkov's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limits as he guided the shuttle towards the flagship's docking bay. Back at the Hybrid Council headquarters, Governor Hawthorne received an urgent communication from Earth. The holographic face of a stern-looking government official materialized before him. "Governor Hawthorne," the official began, his tone clipped and formal. "Reports of Akamar Prime's transformation have reached Earth. The global community is in uproar. We demand a full explanation of the situation immediately." Hawthorne opened his mouth to respond, but the official continued, his voice growing harder. "Be aware, Governor, that if we do not receive satisfactory answers, Earth is prepared to send a military task force to intervene." As Hawthorne grappled with this new threat, the artificial sphere's approach triggered Akamar Prime's automated defenses. Crystal-based energy projectors around the planet hummed to life, creating a shimmering barrier in the upper atmosphere. The sudden activation of the planetary shield sent a ripple effect through the crystal network. Across the surface of Akamar Prime, communication systems crackled with static and power grids flickered. In the medical facility, Colonel Graves' transformation reached a critical point. His consciousness, now deeply integrated with the surrounding crystals, began broadcasting fragmented memories and emotions throughout the local network. Dr. Venn and her team worked desperately to contain the spread of this uncontrolled data transmission. "We need to isolate him," Venn shouted over the growing chaos. "If this spreads to the wider population, the consequences could be catastrophic." At the base of the polar spire, Captain Stryker and Nyla finally reached the portal. Its surface churned with unstable energy, flashes of alien landscapes visible through the distortions. "This is Stryker," the captain reported through the static-filled comm channel. "We've reached the portal, preparing to enter and retrieve Jake and Tara." As Stryker and Nyla stepped toward the threshold, a blinding pulse of energy erupted from the artificial sphere in orbit. The beam struck the portal, causing it to fluctuate wildly. Stryker reached for Nyla's hand as the portal's energy field expanded, engulfing them. "Hold on," he shouted, feeling the irresistible pull of the gateway. In a flash of light, Stryker and Nyla vanished into the portal. The energy field collapsed behind them, leaving behind a fading after-image and a deafening silence. The rescue mission had taken an unexpected turn, plunging deeper into the unknown as the connection to the mysterious crystal world beyond the portal grew increasingly unstable. As the portal's energy dissipated, the crystal formations around the spire began to shift once more, obscuring the gateway and leaving those left behind to wonder about the fate of their friends and the future of Akamar Prime. As the portal's energy dissipated, leaving behind a fading afterimage, the crystal formations around the spire began to shift once more. The gateway that had swallowed Captain Stryker and Nyla vanished, obscured by the ever-changing landscape. Those left behind could only wonder about the fate of their friends and the future of Akamar Prime. In an instant, Captain Stryker and Nyla found themselves transported to an alien crystalline landscape. The abrupt transition left them momentarily disoriented, their hybrid senses overwhelmed by the new environment. "Stryker, are you all right?" Nyla asked, her voice echoing strangely in the unfamiliar atmosphere. The captain nodded, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "I'm fine. This place, it's like Akamar Prime, but more..." Advanced, Nyla finished, her gaze fixed on the towering crystal structures that surrounded them. The formations pulsed with complex energy patterns, creating a dazzling display of light and color. Stryker activated his comm device, but only static greeted him. No contact with base. We're on our own here. We need to find Jake and Tara, Nyla said, her hybrid senses already attuned to the crystalline environment. I can sense something. It's faint, but it's there. The pair set off, their bodies adapting to the alien terrain. They leaped across chasms filled with swirling energy, phased through solid crystal walls and navigated corridors that seemed to reconfigure themselves with each step. Back on Akamar Prime, alarms blared throughout the main research facility as the artificial sphere entered a stable orbit around the planet. Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura worked feverishly at their consoles, their hybrid forms allowing them to process the flood of incoming data at superhuman speeds. "Governor," Dr. Jones called out, his voice tense. "The sphere's surface is reconfiguring. We're detecting a massive energy buildup." Governor Hawthorne rushed to the holographic display, his face illuminated by the pulsing patterns that covered the sphere's surface. "What's it doing?" Before Dr. Nakamura could respond, a section of the sphere's surface began to open, revealing a cavernous docking bay. "Sir," he said, his eyes wide, "something's coming out." A small crystalline vessel emerged from the sphere, its sleek form gliding effortlessly through space as it descended towards the planet's surface. "Alert Admiral Frost," Hawthorne ordered, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "And get me our best hybrid defense team. We need to be ready for anything." As the crystalline ship approached, a hybrid defense squad took up positions around the main research facility. Their bodies shimmered with hardly restrained energy, ready to react at a moment's notice. In orbit, Admiral Frost's quarantine fleet detected the approaching vessel. "All ships, battle stations," Frost commanded, her voice crisp over the comm channel. "But hold fire unless fired upon. We don't know their intentions yet." The crystalline ship touched down in a clearing near the research facility, its hull reconfiguring to form an opening. The hybrid defense team watched, weapons at the ready, as a tall, elegant figure emerged. The alien's body was a seamless blend of organic and crystalline elements, its form radiating an otherworldly grace. It raised a limb in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. "Greetings!" The alien's voice resonated in their minds, bypassing spoken language. "I am Ambassador Zix of the Crystalline Collective. We come in peace and with an offer of assistance." Governor Hawthorne, flanked by Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura, stepped forward. "I am Governor Hawthorne of Akamar Prime. We welcome you, Ambassador Zix, but I must ask about your intentions." Zix's crystalline form shimmered as it responded. "We have been observing your world's transformation with great interest. Our civilization underwent a similar evolution millennia ago. We offer our knowledge to help stabilize your hybrid ecosystem." As discussions with Ambassador Zix began, a crisis unfolded in the medical facility. Colonel Graves, his body now fully integrated with the surrounding crystal structures, emitted powerful energy pulses that resonated with the planet's network. Dr. Venn shouted orders to her team as they worked to contain the energy emissions. "We need to isolate him. If these pulses spread, we could trigger uncontrolled transformations across the planet." Objects around Graves began to transform, taking on crystalline properties. The walls of the medical facility cracked and reformed, crystal growth spreading rapidly. "Evacuate the facility," Dr. Venn ordered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and cracking crystal. "We can't contain it." In the alien crystal world, Captain Stryker and Nyla finally reached a vast chamber filled with pulsating formations. In the center, they found Jake and Tara, their bodies partially merged with the surrounding structures. "Jake! Tara!" Stryker called out, but the pair remained unresponsive, their eyes closed as if in a deep trance. As Stryker and Nyla approached, the crystals around Jake and Tara began to vibrate, emitting a high-pitched resonance that made their hybrid senses real. "We need to get them out of here," Nyla said, reaching out to touch Jake's crystalline form. The moment her hand made contact, a surge of energy coursed through the chamber. Jake and Tara's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. The convergence has begun, Jake and Tara spoke in unison, their voices echoing with alien harmonics. The bridge between worlds is forming. Back on Akamar Prime, Ambassador Zix shared advanced crystal manipulation techniques with the hybrid population. As the knowledge transfer began, a massive crystalline structure started to form between the artificial sphere and the planet. Admiral Zara's voice crackled over the comm system. "Governor, we're detecting an enormous energy signature. A structure is forming between the sphere and Akamar Prime." Before anyone could respond, a planet-wide surge pulsed through the crystalline network. Every hybrid on Akamar Prime experienced a momentary connection to a vast alien consciousness. Fragmented visions of advanced crystal worlds and glimpses of a potential future flooded their minds. As the visions faded, the hybrid population was left in a state of awe and apprehension. The transformation of Akamar Prime had entered a new phase, and the fate of their world hung in the balance. Governor Hawthorne turned to Ambassador Zix, his expression a mix of wonder and concern. "What's happening to our world?" Zix's crystalline form pulsed with energy as it responded. "Your planet is awakening, Governor. The true evolution of Akamar Prime has only just begun." "Begun," Ambassador Zix continued, its crystalline form pulsing with a kaleidoscope of colors. "Your world is integrating into the greater cosmic network of crystal planets." As Zix spoke, a tremor rippled through the ground beneath their feet. The air crackled with energy, and every hybrid on Akamar Prime felt a sudden, intense connection to something vast and alien. In the alien crystal world, Jake and Tara's eyes snapped open simultaneously, their bodies glowing with an otherworldly light. Captain Stryker and Nyla watched in awe as the two moved in perfect synchronization, their hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. "We understand now," Jake said, his voice resonating with newfound power. Tara nodded, her tentacles swaying gently. "The knowledge of eons, it's all here, within us." With fluid motions, they began to manipulate the surrounding crystals. The chamber around them shifted and morphed, responding to their will. In moments, a shimmering portal materialized before them, its surface rippling like liquid light. "We can go home," Tara said, reaching out to take Jake's hand. Stryker stepped forward, his eyes wide. "How did you—" "There's no time to explain," Jake interrupted. "We need to get back to Akamar Prime. Our world needs us." Without hesitation, the four of them stepped through the portal. In a flash of blinding light, they found themselves standing atop the polar spire on Akamar Prime. The view before them was breathtaking. The planet's surface was alive with pulsing energy, crystal formations growing and shifting in real time. Governor Hawthorne and Ambassador Zix turned in surprise as the group materialized. "Jake! Tara!" Hawthorne exclaimed. "How did you—" "Governor," Jake said, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there before, "we've seen what Akamar Prime can become. We can help guide our world through this transformation." Tara nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "But first, we need to stabilize the current changes. Where's Colonel Graves?" Dr. Ven's voice crackled over the comm system, tinged with panic. "We have a situation at the medical facility. Graves' transformation is out of control." Without a word, Jake and Tara leaped from the spire, their bodies shimmering as they phased through the air. They landed gracefully outside the medical facility, where chaos reigned. Crystal growths burst through walls and floors, reshaping the building with each passing second. Inside, they found Dr. Ven and her team struggling to contain the pulsing energy emanating from Colonel Graves. The colonel's body had merged with the surrounding crystal structures, his form barely recognizable. Jake and Tara approached, their hands outstretched. As they neared Graves, the wild energy seemed to calm, responding to their presence. "We can stabilize him," Tara said, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. Jake nodded, closing his eyes in concentration. "Dr. Ven, we need you to complete the hybridization process. We'll establish a harmonic resonance to keep him stable." Dr. Ven hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "All right, let's do this." As Jake and Tara began to weave a complex pattern of energy around Graves, Dr. Ven and her team moved in. Their hybrid bodies allowed them to work at superhuman speeds, adjusting and fine-tuning the transformation process. The air hummed with energy as Jake and Tara's abilities meshed with the advanced medical techniques. Slowly, Graves's form began to stabilize. The wild crystal growths receded, and his body took on a more defined shape, still clearly hybrid, but no longer merged with his surroundings. With a gasp, Graves' eyes opened. He looked around in confusion, then down at his transformed body. What happened? Jake smiled, helping the colonel to his feet. Welcome to the new Akamar Prime, Colonel. As the situation at the medical facility stabilized, Ambassador Zix initiated the knowledge transfer to the hybrid population. A wave of information swept across the planet, each hybrid suddenly gaining access to advanced crystal manipulation techniques. Across Akamar Prime, hybrids began to experiment with their new abilities. The once chaotic growth of the Dyson sphere slowed and stabilized, forming a protective shell around the planet without threatening its moons. Jake and Tara, now recognized as leaders in this new era, worked tirelessly with Dr. Jones and Dr. Nakamura to integrate the knowledge from the crystalline collective. They developed new techniques to balance the planet's ecosystem with its inhabitants' needs. In the heart of the main research facility, Jake stood before a holographic display of Akamar Prime. With a wave of his hand, he reshaped a section of the landscape, creating a stunning crystal city that seamlessly blended with the surrounding environment. The possibilities are endless, he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Tara nodded, her tentacles intertwining with his. We can create a world beyond anything we ever imagined. As they worked, Governor Hawthorne entered the room, his face serious. Jake, Tara, we need to discuss our next steps. The Crystalline Collective has offered to make Akamar Prime a protectorate. It would ensure our continued guidance and protection as we evolve. Jake and Tara exchanged a look, their hybrid senses allowing them to communicate without words. After a moment, they turned back to Hawthorne. We think it's the right move, Governor, Tara said. We've seen glimpses of what the collective can offer. This partnership could be the key to our future. Hawthorne nodded, relief evident on his face. I'll begin negotiations immediately, and there's more. Admiral Frost's quarantine fleet is standing down. We're reopening communication channels with Earth. As the news spread, a sense of hope and excitement swept through the hybrid population. Akamar Prime was no longer an isolated experiment. It was becoming a symbol of successful human-alien cooperation. Days later, a ceremony was held atop the polar spire. Jake and Tara stood at its peak, their bodies shimmering with crystalline energy. Below them, the entire population of Akamar Prime gathered, their hybrid forms a testament to how far they had come. Jake raised his hands, and a beam of brilliant light shot from the spire, connecting with the artificial sphere in orbit. The connection pulsed with energy, establishing Akamar Prime as a key node in the interstellar network of crystal worlds. As the ceremony concluded, Jake turned to Tara, taking her hand in his. Their tentacles wrapped around each other naturally, an expression of their deep bond. With a shared thought, they began to shape the crystals around them, creating a majestic structure that rose into the sky. The cathedral-like formation sparkled in the light of Akamar's star, its intricate spires and arches, a symbol of the bright future that lay ahead. As Jake and Tara stood together, surrounded by their fellow hybrids, they looked out at the star-filled sky with a sense of wonder and limitless possibility. The transformation of Akamar Prime was just the beginning, but with their newfound knowledge and abilities, the hybrid population was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As night fell on this new world, the crystal structures pulsed with life and energy, a beacon of hope in the vast expanse of space.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.